Imagine you are not sitting in front of a screen, but inside a strange capsule of metal and glass. Lights are dim, instruments line the walls, and right in the center, a great circular dial is waiting for someone to touch it. Instead of hours and minutes, this dial is labeled with words that feel too big to say out loud. Hadean, Archean, Proterozoic, Paleozoic, Mesozoic. This is the cockpit of the time machine. Outside that glass canopy is the Earth, you know. Blue oceans, white clouds, continents patterned like a half-finished jigsaw puzzle. Cities glitter at night, ships trace white lines on the sea, satellites blink overhead. For us, the world feels ancient. We talk about thousands of years ago almost as if it were forever, but on the dial in front of you, 10,000 years is barely a tick of the needle. If we could give Earth a birthday, it would be about 4.5 billion years ago. Write that number down, 4,500,000,000 years. Human history, from our earliest civilizations to today, fits into only the last tiny slice of that line. If the entire history of the planet were compressed into a single calendar year, the dinosaurs would disappear around Christmas, and all of recorded human history would happen in the final seconds before midnight on December 31st. That scale is so enormous that ordinary dates become useless. A history book might say, in the year 476 Rome fell. A geology book says, in the late Triassic, about 210 million years ago, and that is still considered fairly recent. So geologists invented their own way of telling time. Instead of hours and minutes, they use 4 main boxes of time, stacked inside each other like Russian dolls. At the top is the eon, the largest division. Eons are so vast that only 4 of them cover the entire history of Earth. Each eon is broken into several eras. Eras are broken into periods. Periods are split into epochs, and sometimes epochs are divided even further into ages when we need extra detail. If that sounds confusing, think of it like this. A year is like an eon. A season is like an era. A month is like a period. A week is like an epoch. You can zoom in or zoom out, depending on how much detail you need. Talking about the Mesozoic is like talking about last summer. Talking about the late Jurassic is like saying the first week of August. Because the numbers are so large, even our units of measurement had to be upgraded. Instead of counting in simple years, geologists count in kiloannum, thousands of years, ma meganam, millions of years. So 66 ma ago means 66 million years before today. The formation of Earth, about 4,540 ma ago. The appearance of our own species, Homo sapiens, roughly 0.3 ma ago, less than 500,000 years. Our time machine is built on these units. Every time you twist the dial, you are not jumping a few decades, but tens of millions of years at a time. But how do we know any of this? We weren't there to watch oceans condense from steam or the first forests grow. No one filmed the extinction of the dinosaurs or the moment a fish grew limbs and pulled itself onto a muddy shore. Instead, we rely on 3 kinds of quiet evidence. The first is written in atoms. Certain elements inside crystals are unstable. They slowly, predictably decay into other elements, like sand falling through an hourglass. By measuring how much of the parent and how much of the daughter element is present in a rock, scientists can calculate how long the clock has been running. This is called radiometric dating. The second is written in bones and shells. Fossils of creatures that lived and died long ago are locked into layers of rock. Some species existed for only a short slice of time, but left their remains all over the world. Whenever we find their fossils, we know roughly which slice of time we are seeing. The third is written in the layers themselves. On the seafloor, on lake beds, along ancient rivers, sediments piled up year after year. The general rule is simple. The layer on top is younger than the layer beneath it. When we read those layers from bottom to top, we are turning the pages of a book that took millions of years to write. By combining all 3 atoms, fossils, and layers, geologists have built a time scale as detailed and reliable as any human calendar, stretching back not just centuries, but billions of years. And that is what our machine is wired into. In this series, we will use it to travel through 12 major periods and more than 4 billion years of planetary history. We will watch Earth change from a molten inferno to a water world, from a world of slime and single cells to a planet ruled by forests, monsters, mammoths, and finally by a hairless ape that calls itself human. Each chapter will be one stop along that road, from the hellish Hadean, through the silent oceans of the Archean, across the oxygen revolution of the Proterozoic, into the crowded seas of the Paleozoic, through the dinosaur age of the Mesozoic, and into the mammal and human-dominated Cenozoic we live in now. You fasten your harness. Outside the window, the familiar shapes of modern continents begin to blur as data streams across the control panel. The great dial slowly turns backward, ticking past thousands, then millions, then hundreds of millions of years. City lights vanish, coastlines flow and merge, the ice caps appear, grow, and disappear again. At the center of the console, a single word begins to glow. Hadean. The time machine hums, gathering power. The trip to the very beginning of Earth is about to start. The time machine shudders as the dial locks into place. Hadean, approximately 4.5 to 4.0 billion years ago. Outside the window, the familiar blue Earth dissolves into darkness. For a heartbeat there is nothing, no continents, no clouds, no moon. Just a swirling field of dust and rock orbiting a newborn sun that shines a little dimmer than the star, you know. Destination reached, the console whispers. Formation of Earth. You expect to see a planet. Instead, you see chaos, birthed in a storm of stone. The early solar system is not a peaceful neighborhood. It is a demolition derby made of worlds. Leftover chunks from the birth of the sun-dust ice, metal clumped together under gravity, forming ever larger bodies called planetesimals. These in turn collide, merge, and collide again. Far below the time machine, you watch a glowing sphere grow with every impact. Sometimes a rock the size of a mountain slams into it. Sometimes the rock is the size of Mars. One particular collision changes everything. A world roughly the size of Mars plows into the young Earth at an angle, blasting molten rock into orbit. For a moment the screen is nothing but white light and vaporized stone. When the glare fades, a ring of glowing debris encircles the planet. Over time, that debris will cool and gather into a single companion, the Moon. This is not speculation pulled from thin air. The rocks Apollo astronauts carried back from the lunar surface share an uncanny chemical similarity with Earth's crust. It is as if the Moon was carved out of our planet's outer layers and frozen in the sky. The giant impact hypothesis is our best explanation for that connection. Back in the cockpit, warning lights still glow red. Surface conditions, unsuitable for life. Estimated surface temperature, over 1500 degrees Celsius. Magma ocean present. Earth, in the Hadean, is not a place you can stand on. It is a molten world, a global ocean of magma, thousands of kilometers deep, rolls and churns over a partly solidifying core. New impacts punch through the liquid rock, throwing more material into space. The crust, such as it is, forms and melts and reforms in a constant frenzy. The name Hadean was chosen for a reason. It comes from Hades, the Greek underworld. Looking at the planet now, the myth feels conservative. A sky of fire and poison. You turn your attention upward, away from the raging surface, and study the Erif. You can call it that. There is no blue sky here. The atmosphere is thick with volcanic gases, steam from water released by molten rock, carbon dioxide and methane, sulfur compounds that sting even through your filtered readings, almost no free oxygen. Lightning forks through choking clouds. Ash and vapor boil upward from gigantic fissures where the mantle vents its fury. Every breath, if you could breathe, would be poison. And yet, something essential is happening. Every volcano that erupts, every vent that belches steam, is slowly delivering volatile water, carbon, nitrogen from the interior to the surface. At the same time, comets and water-rich asteroids deliver more water and organic molecules from space. In school, we often imagine oceans simply appearing. In reality, they are distilled from rock and sky and ice, drop by invisible drop, over millions of years. For now, that water exists mostly as vapor. The surface is too hot for oceans to last. Any liquid instantly boils. But the time machine's projections show a trend. The planet is cooling. Cooling the inferno as the worst of the bombardment eases and the giant impacts become rarer. The global magma ocean begins to freeze from the top down. Silicate minerals crystallize, forming the first patches of solid crust. They are fragile, constantly being torn apart by impacts and subsumed by new upwellings of lava. But they exist. Time, in this chapter, must be sped up. Thousands of years pass in an instant, then millions. The surface temperature drops, little by little, steam in the atmosphere condenses into rain. At first the rain evaporates before it hits the ground, then one day it doesn't. The first real storms on Earth are not gentle spring showers, they are planet-wide deluges. For the equivalent of centuries, rain hammers down on cooling rock, hissing into steam where it hits still hot lava, washing dissolved minerals into newly formed basins. Water, for the first time, can puddle, then pool, then collect into primitive seas. They are small, shallow, and constantly reshaped by volcanism and impacts, but they are more than this planet has ever had. The Hadean is not just fire, it is the beginning of oceans. If you could zoom in on the surface now, you would see expanses of black basaltic crust, cracked and glowing at the seams, lakes and temporary seas of boiling or near boiling water, new volcanic islands rising and sinking like bubbles in a pot, meteorites still falling, but less often than before. It is still not a world you would call home, but compared to the earlier inferno, this is progress. Hints of a crust, echoes of an ocean for a long time. Geologists believed that almost nothing survived from the Hadean. The constant remelting of the crust seemed to erase any record. But a few stubborn grains of mineral tell a different story. In places like Western Australia and Canada, scientists have found zircon crystals older than 4 billion years. These tiny, durable minerals formed in ancient rocks that have long since vanished, melted or crushed beyond recognition. But the zircons endured, trapped in younger rocks like time capsules. By studying their chemistry, we can infer that some patches of crust cooled enough to resist complete melting. Liquid water interacted with those rocks as early as 4.3 to 4.4 billion years ago. That means oceans, or at least long-lived seas, may have existed surprisingly early, right in the twilight of the Hadean. The time machine projects a map onto the glass. No familiar continents, yet no Atlantic or Pacific, just an alien patchwork of short-lived crust, dark seas, and glowing fissures. It is still said that no life could have survived this era, but that verdict is no longer as absolute as it once was. Some scientists suggest that the earliest chemical steps toward life-complex organic molecules, primitive membranes, self-copying chains might have already begun in hot pools, deep-sea vents, or even within porous rocks. We have no fossils from the Hadean, no smoking gun, only models and hints in the chemistry of ancient minerals and meteorites. So for this journey, we will keep to what we can show, a young planet, still bleeding heat, but slowly assembling the ingredients required for biology. The end of the underworld. As your eyes adjust to this apocalyptic landscape, the timer on the console continues to tick. 4.5 billion years ago, 4.4, 4.3, 4.2, 4.1, 4.1, 4.0. Over roughly 500 million years, the Hadean sculpts the foundation. The planet grows to its full size through relentless impacts. It differentiates into core, mantle, and crust. The moon is born. Atmosphere and oceans begin to form, distilled from rock and delivered by ice. The worst of the bombardment subsides. Earth is still volatile. Earth is still dangerous, but the age of unending hellfire is fading. Ahead lies the Archean, an era of quieter, darker oceans, of patient chemistry and the first true signs of life. Warning, the machine intones softly. Radiation and temperature still lethal. Recommend remaining inside capsule for next jump. You glance one last time at the world below, bruised, cracked, steaming, and somehow promising. Then your hand reaches for the dial. Next stop, the Archean world of the first microbes and the slow, almost invisible revolution that will change the face of the planet. Welcome back to our journey through time. The clock dial turns past 4 billion years ago, and we leave the fiery chaos of the Hadean behind. As the constant flicker of giant meteor impacts fades, Earth reappears outside our window, and for the first time, it truly looks like a world. It's no longer a pure fireball, but a dark, brooding sphere, a deep blue-black globe wrapped in heavy, thick clouds. Fiery orange and red lines still glow where volcanoes tear at the crust. But between them lies something new and utterly astonishing: water, everywhere. From our orbit, the early Archean Earth is mostly ocean. Liquid water now covers almost the entire surface, pooling in vast, planet-spanning basins. But these aren't the bright blue seas you see on postcards. They are dark, murky, and rich with dissolved iron and volcanic chemicals, giving them a greenish or rusty tint. There are no large continents yet. Instead, we see scattered chains of volcanic islands and small, rugged protocols. These are the very first pieces of thick, buoyant crust, riding on the slow churning of the mantle like broken plates on a pot of simmering soup. Let's check the atmospheric readings. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide levels are high. Methane is significant, and oxygen, almost zero. With no ozone layer, the raw sunlight that filters through the haze of volcanic dust paints the sky in strange, murky colors: yellows, reds, and browns. The sun itself is fainter than today, but a thick blanket of greenhouse gases keeps the planet warm enough for all this liquid water to exist. It's an alien world, but compared to the Hadean, it's calm. And in that quiet, chemistry is getting very busy. No one knows exactly where life started, but the Archean gives us some prime suspects. Maybe it was in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where soup-treated mineral-rich water gushed from the seafloor, creating a perfect chemical laboratory. Or perhaps it was in shallow tidal pools, where organic molecules from meteorites and atmospheric reactions were concentrated by evaporation, powered by lightning and sunlight. Or maybe it all began deep within the pores of hot volcanic rock. Whichever is true, the basic idea is the same. Simple molecules became more complex. Chains of carbon and nitrogen began to store information. Some structures accidentally learned to copy themselves. Most failed, but a few succeeded. And at some point, the line was crossed. Chemistry gave way to biology. The first true cells appeared. They were prokaryote, simple, single-celled organisms, far smaller than anything you could see. To the naked eye, the planet looked just as empty as before. But if you could look at a drop of Archean seawater under a microscope, you would see it teeming with the planet's first citizens, tiny spheres and rods, floating, dividing, and ruling this world for billions of years. The Archean is often called the age of bacteria, and for good reason. For over 1 billion years, life on Earth is almost entirely microbial. No fish, no plants, no dinosaurs. But only microbes doesn't mean nothing is happening. Some fed on chemicals from vents, others learned to harvest sunlight, and then a truly game-changing group evolved. See, these blue-green microbes developed true photosynthesis. Using water and sunlight, they pulled in carbon dioxide and released a waste product, oxygen. At first, this oxygen was immediately soaked up by iron dissolved in the oceans. It created massive layers of rust that settled on the seafloor, forming what we now call banded iron formations. These rocks are the fossilized fingerprints of ancient bacteria, telling a story written over billions of years. Cyanobacteria also built the first visible life structures, stromatolites. Imagine sticky mats of microbes growing in shallow water. They trap sediment, then grow up through it to reach the light, forming a new mat. Layer by layer, they build rocky domes and columns. Some of these are over 3.4 billion years old, the oldest visible fossils on Earth. Each one is a city of billions of cells, turning sunlight into energy, and slowly, molecule by molecule, reshaping our planet. By the late Archean, these microbes are spreading across the globe, quietly pumping out oxygen, but you still couldn't breathe here. The oxygen was being mopped up as fast as it was made, reacting with iron and volcanic gases. It hadn't yet built up in the atmosphere. Still, the stage was being set for the next eon's dramatic event, the Great Oxidation. As the Archean draws to a close around 2.5 billion years ago, Earth has stable oceans, small continents, and a thriving biosphere of microbes. The days are only 18 hours long, and the moon hangs larger in the sky. This long, quiet period wasn't empty. It was practice. Life was perfecting its fundamental machinery: DNA, metabolism, photosynthesis tools that every future plant and animal, including us, would inherit. Life had already transformed the planet once, without a single bone, leaf, or eye. In our next chapter, we'll see what happens when all that hidden work finally bursts into the open. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for our next stop on this incredible journey. The time machine's dial clicks forward. Proterozoic, approximately 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago, outside the window. The Archean seas fade, and a new Earth swims into view. At first glance, it doesn't look so different. Still mostly ocean, still wrapped in hazy clouds, still without forests or animals. But the sensors on your console tell a different story. Something invisible is building, something that will change everything. When the air turns dangerous on the display, a graph appears, a thin line showing the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere over time. For most of Earth's early history, that line clings stubbornly to zero. Now, slowly, it begins to rise. Cyanobacteria, those tireless blue-green microbes from the Archean, have continued their quiet labor. In shallow seas all over the world, they switch on with every sunrise, capturing sunlight, splitting water, and exhaling oxygen. At first, as you saw in the last chapter, that oxygen didn't make it very far. It rusted iron in the oceans and reacted with gases from volcanoes. But over millions of years, those chemical sinks begin to fill. Iron in the oceans gets locked away in thick layers of banded iron formations on the seafloor. Volcanic gases change as the planet cools. At some point around 2.4 billion years ago, the balance tips. Oxygen starts to escape the oceans and leak into the sky faster than it can be absorbed. The line on the graph jumps upward. To us, it still looks tiny, maybe a fraction of a percent of the air. But to the microbes on Earth at that time, this is a catastrophe. For many early life forms, oxygen is not a gift, it is a toxin. It tears apart delicate molecules, damages cell membranes, and disrupts ancient metabolic pathways that evolved in an oxygen-free world. Whole microbial communities suffocate in the strange new gas. From orbit, you can't hear the panic, but the consequences are written in stone. This event has a name, the Great Oxidation Event. It is the planet's first great mass extinction and the prelude to everything that follows. Planet of snow and rust. Oxygen doesn't just kill microbes, it also rearranges the planet's climate. Methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, is broken down by the increasing oxygen and sunlight in the upper atmosphere. With less methane to trap heat, the world begins to cool. Continents now larger than in the Archean are clustered in different positions, changing ocean currents and heat flow. The result may have been some of the most dramatic ice ages in Earth's history. You watch from the time machine as white spreads from the poles toward the equator. Ice creeps down valleys, crosses lowlands, and thickens over shallow seas. The oceans darken under floating lids of pack ice. In some models, Earth becomes a snowball, Earth almost entirely frozen from pole to pole. For life, this is another crisis. Sunlight is blocked by ice and reflected back into space. Photosynthetic organisms are squeezed into thin strips of open water near volcanically active regions or under thin ice. But life is stubborn. Microbes huddle around hydrothermal vents, cling to cracks in the ice, survive in pockets of liquid water. The planet shivers for millions of years. Then, as volcanic carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere with nowhere to go, the greenhouse effect roars back. Ice melts. Oceans reliquefy. The snowball slushes, cracks, and finally gives way to dark, open water again. The lesson is clear. Even when Earth seems on the edge of death, feedbacks pull it back. The climate swings may be violent, but they are also part of a long balancing act. A new kind of cell while the planet's surface is freezing and thawing. Something utterly new is evolving in its microscopic underworld. The time machine zooms into a drop of seawater. At first, you see the usual suspects. Small, simple prokaryotic cells, each little more than a bag of chemicals with DNA floating inside. Then you spot something different. A larger cell, thicker, more complex. With a command, you magnify it. Inside its membrane, structures become visible. Folded inner compartments, tiny energy factories, and most striking of all, a distinct central space where the DNA is carefully packaged. This is not a bacterium, it is a eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotes' true nuclear cells are the design used by all plants, animals, fungi, and us. Their origin is one of the most extraordinary partnerships in the history of life. One leading idea goes like this. Long ago, a large host cell engulfed a smaller, energy-efficient bacterium, but did not digest it. Instead, the two entered into a partnership. The small cell provided energy to the host. The host provided protection and raw materials. Over generations, the inner bacterium lost much of its independence and became a permanent resident organelle. Today, we call these energy factories mitochondria. Every breath you take, every step you walk, every thought you think uses energy processed by the descendants of those ancient symbionts. In some lineages, a similar event happened again with photosynthetic bacteria. Swallowed, tamed, and turned into chloroplasts, they gave rise to algae and, later, plants. From simple mergers of cells, a new level of complexity was born. The first experiments in multicellularity. The Proterozoic stretches on hundreds of millions of years pass, while eukaryotic cells diversify. They evolve into different microscopic shapes and strategies. Algae that harvest light, protists that hunt smaller cells, strange hybrids that blur the line between plant and animal. Eventually, some of these eukaryotes stumble on a powerful idea, sticking together. At first it might be temporary cells dividing but not fully separating, forming chains or clumps. But in some groups, the arrangement becomes permanent. Different cells in the cluster begin to specialize. One type moves, another digests, another reproduces. You are watching the first experiments in multicellular life. They are humble, filaments of algae, jelly-like blobs, mats of cooperating cells. No brain, no skeleton, no clear organs. But this division of labor opens the door to much larger and more complex bodies. On the seafloor, strange new forms appear. Soft, frond-like organisms anchored in sediments. Quilted, disc-shaped creatures pressed into ancient mud. This is the late Proterozoic, specifically the Ediacaran period, the last chapter before the famous Cambrian explosion. Paleontologists have given these beings names, like Dickinsonia, Charniodiscus, and Sprigini. Their bodies look unlike any modern animal, though some may be distant relatives of jellyfish, worms, or even early arthropods. Others might represent entire branches of life that later vanished. From orbit, you would see nothing of them. But if the time machine could park on an Ediacaran seafloor and flood the scene with light, you'd see a quiet alien garden, leaf-like forms waving in gentle currents, blobs crawling slowly through the mud, circular impressions where something once lay. They leave no shells, no bones, only subtle impressions in sandstone that we've only begun to understand. Preparing the stage for an explosion by the end of the Proterozoic. The planet is almost unrecognizable compared with the Archean. Oxygen is now a standard component of the atmosphere, high enough to support large active organisms. Eukaryotic cells have spread worldwide and diversified into countless microscopic lineages. Multicellularity has independently evolved in several groups: algae, fungi, and early animals. Climate has swung through snowball phases and warm intervals, testing life with extremes. It has taken nearly 2 billion years, almost half of Earth's history, to get from the first cells to this point. To a human impatient for dinosaurs or people, it might feel slow. To evolution, it is simply the necessary groundwork. The time machine hums softly as the Proterozoic clock runs down. 800 million years ago, 700, 600, 550, 541. In the dark seas, the Ediacaran organisms live out their quiet lives, unaware that they stand at the edge of a revolution. Genetic toolkits for building bodies, genes that control where limbs go, how segments form, how tissues specialize, are being assembled and refined in their cells. Soon, in geological terms, those toolkits will be unleashed in a burst of creativity we call the Cambrian explosion, when animals with shells, claws, eyes, and complex bodies will flood the oceans. The dial on the console shifts again, sliding past Proterozoic toward a new label. Phanerozoic, visible life, the age of hidden microbes, is giving way to an age of visible monsters. The dial turns, and for the first time, the label above it changes: Eon, Phanerozoic, visible life. First stop, Cambrian period, approximately 541 to 485 million years ago. The world outside the time machine looks familiar at first glance. A blue planet, scattered continents, white clouds. But when you drop the machine down toward the ocean and peer beneath the surface, you realize you have never seen anything like this. The seas are crowded. The Cambrian explosion. For billions of years, life was mostly invisible microscopic cells, thin microbial mats, soft fronds on the seafloor. Now, in a relatively short slice of time, geologically speaking, something astonishing happens. The fossil record suddenly fills with animals that have hard shells and exoskeletons, joints and legs, teeth, claws and spines, eyes. Actual eyes that can see. This burst of evolutionary innovation is called the Cambrian explosion. It's not a single moment, but a few tens of millions of years, when almost all the major animal body plans appear. You park the time machine in the shallows of a Cambrian sea and switch on the external lights. The water glows green with plankton. On the seafloor lies a bustling alien city. Trilobites armored arthropods with segmented bodies and faceted eyes crawl over the sediment like ancient horseshoe crabs. Some are no larger than your thumbnail. Others would fill both hands. Their tracks crisscross the mud in every direction. Worms of all kinds wriggle through burrows, churning the sediment. Spiky, soft-bodied creatures like Hallucigenia stagger about on thin legs, their backs bristling with defensive spines. Delicate fan-shaped animals filter food from the water. Jellyfish-like forms pulse slowly past. Then the top of the food chain arrives. A shadow glides overhead. Anomalocaris, one of the first large predators. It swims with flexible side flaps. Its body more than half a meter long, huge for its time. Two grasping appendages lined with spines reach forward, and a circular toothed mouth opens and closes like a camera shutter. A trilobite is unlucky enough to be in its path. In a quick lunge it is seized, cracked, and eaten. This is new. During the Phanerozoic, there were few animals capable of active hunting on this scale. Now, predator-prey arms races have begun. Animals that can see, move quickly, and defend themselves have a huge advantage. Natural selection responds by sharpening shells, refining eyes, strengthening limbs. Behind this explosion of forms lie genetic toolkits, developmental genes that tell bodies where to grow legs, how many segments to form, where to put a mouth or an eye. These genes have existed in simpler form since the Phanerozoic in the Cambrian. Evolution starts remixing and combining them in wild ways. From a distance, it looks like creativity. Up close, it is survival. The end of the Cambrian, the start of the Ordovician. The Cambrian world is still dominated by oceans. Life has not yet seriously colonized the land. There are no forests, no animals on the beaches, only bare rock and perhaps thin crusts of microbes. But under the waves, ecosystems are complex. Diverse seafloor communities, swarms of trilobites and other arthropods, early mollusks, sponges, and brachiopods, strange experimental body plans that will not last after tens of millions of years. Some of these lineages vanish in smaller extinction pulses that mark the end of the Cambrian. Many survivors, however, continue into the next period. Ordovician, approximately 485 to 444 million years ago from orbit. Earth in the Ordovician looks different. The continents have rearranged again. A giant southern supercontinent Gondwana stretches toward the South Pole. Other landmasses like Laurentia, ancestral North America, lie closer to the equator, surrounded by warm, shallow seas. Those shallow seas are about to become some of the most productive habitats in Earth's history. The Ordovician gardens drop the time machine into an Ordovician inland sea, a broad, warm, sunlit shelf flooding part of a continent. The water is alive with floating plankton, the base of the food web. Below, the seafloor is crowded. Coral-like animals build early reefs. Brachiopods, lampshell animals with two valves, anchor themselves to the bottom, waving their feeding tentacles in the current. Bryozoans form delicate branching colonies. Crinoids, or sea lilies, extend feathered arms into the water, rooted to the floor by stalks. It is, in its own way, an underwater forest. Trilobites are still here, though changed in form and behavior. Nautiloid cephalopods, early relatives of squids and octopuses, cruise the water with long, straight or gently curved shells, using jet propulsion to stalk prey. Some reach several meters in length, becoming the top predators of these seas. And then there are the newcomers, fish. They look nothing like the fish you know. These are small, jawless creatures, nagnathans, with simple, armor-like head shields and elongated bodies. They filter food from the water or suck organic matter from the seafloor. Their descendants, many millions of years later, will evolve jaws and dominate the oceans. But this is where their story begins. Meanwhile, something subtle but profound is happening on land. The coasts are no longer completely barren. Low mats of algae and fungi creep over damp rocks and mud. The first non-vascular plants, akin to mosses and liverworts, begin to appear in moist areas near the water's edge. They have no true roots or woody stems, but they can cling to surfaces, trap sediments, and slowly begin the long process of turning bare rock into soil. It doesn't look like much, just dark smears of life hugging shorelines. Yet this is the first serious step toward greening the continents. An early mass extinction, the Ordovician, is a time of flourishing and diversification. Marine biodiversity increases dramatically. By some counts, it quadruples compared to earlier times. Ecosystems grow more complex, niches fill, then the climate shifts. Continents drift so that Gondwana moves directly over the South Pole. Vast ice sheets spread across the supercontinent. Sea levels fall as water is locked up in glacial ice. Shallow seas that once teemed with life shrink or vanish, exposing seafloors and destroying habitats. The Earth enters a major ice age. From the time machine, you can watch the whitecap spread. The shallow epicontinental seas recede, and coastlines creep outward. For the organisms living there, this is disastrous. Communities adapted to stable, warm, shallow water find themselves frozen, dried, or stranded. Over a span of a few million years, about 85% of marine species disappear. This end-Ordovician mass extinction is one of the largest in Earth's history, rivaled only by the catastrophe that will end the Permian much later. It is a harsh reminder that evolution does not proceed in a straight, gentle line. It surges forward, stumbles, collapses, and rebuilds. Yet even here, in loss, there is preparation. Many groups that will shape later eras survive. Early fish, some trilobites and cephalopods, corals, brachiopods and bryozoans, primitive land plants along the shores when the ice eventually retreats and sea levels rise again. These survivors will radiate into the emptied niches. New forms will appear, better adapted, more varied. The Phanerozoic has only just begun, and already it has delivered an explosion of diversity and a brutal pruning. Ahead lie more experiments: forests, giant insects, amphibians, reptiles, and one of the greatest biological catastrophes of all time. The dial on the console ticks forward again, toward the Silurian and Devonian, the age when life decisively climbs out of the water and onto land. Hello, and welcome back to our journey through time. Last we saw, the Ordovician period ended in a global freeze, wiping out countless species. But life is resilient. As our time machine returns to Earth, we see a world in recovery. The ice is gone, the seas are rising, and a new era is dawning, the Silurian period. From orbit, we see shallow warm seas creeping back over the continents. Let's dive in. The seafloor is bustling with life, a vibrant nursery rebuilding itself. New types of corals, called tabulate and rugose corals, are constructing the first large, complex reefs. Hiding among their branches are brachiopods, filtering food from the water, and trilobites, a little less common now, but still scuttling along. And look, they're the terrors of the Silurian seas, the eurypterids, or sea scorpions. Some of these predators grew over 2 meters long, with spiny claws and powerful tails, making them the apex hunters of their time. But the real revolution is happening on the shore. The first hints of land life from the Ordovician are now becoming a full-blown invasion. We land on a rocky coast. The air is still thin, but along the damp ground and riverbanks, we see something amazing. Small, green, upright shoots. These are the first vascular plants. Like cooks, they might look like tiny matchsticks, but they are changing the world, holding soil in place, pumping out oxygen, and creating a foothold for other pioneers. Tiny arthropods, like millipede ancestors, are already exploring this new green frontier. Back in the ocean, another major innovation is taking shape: jaws. Until now, fish were jawless, sucking or filtering their food. But now, new groups appear with bony headplates and movable jaws. These are the gnathostomes, the ancestors of almost every vertebrate with a backbone today, including us. The ability to bite and chew unleashes an evolutionary arms race, making predation more efficient and defense more critical. The Silurian was a time of quiet but steady innovation. As it gives way to the next period, the Devonian, these innovations are about to explode. Welcome to the age of fishes. Dropping into a Devonian ocean is like entering a completely different world. The water is swarming with fish of every shape and size. There are the placoderms, heavily armored fish like the monstrous Dunkleosteus, a nearly 8-meter-long predator with jaws that could crush anything. Early sharks and rays glide through the water, more streamlined and agile. And then there are the bony fishes, split into two crucial groups: ray-finned and lobe-finned fish. The lobe-finned fish, with their fleshy, bone-supported fins, are the ones to watch. Those fins are the blueprint for legs. While the seas are ruled by fish, the land is undergoing its own spectacular transformation. The small shoreline plants of the Silurian have evolved into the planet's first true forests. We're talking tall club masses, towering horsetails, and the first tree-like plants, like Archaeopteris, with real wood and deep roots. For the first time, the continents are covered in a rustling, three-dimensional world of green. This creates complex new habitats, and animals are quick to move in. Centipedes, arachnids, and early insect-like creatures now roam a world with a canopy, an understory, and a rich layer of soil. Now, let's visit a shallow, muddy river delta late in the Devonian. Here, lobe-finned fish are making their boldest move. In these oxygen waters, some evolve simple lungs to gulp air and use their strong limb-like fins to prop themselves up or push through the mud. Fossils like the famous Tiktaalik capture is perfectly a creature that is part fish, part four-limbed animal. It has scales and gills, but also a flexible neck and fins with wrist-like joints. It could haul itself onto the shore, bridging the gap between water and land. From creatures like Tiktaalik, the first true tetrapods, like a Canthostega, will emerge with distinct legs and feet. Life is no longer just visiting land, it's moving in for good. But the Devonian story isn't all triumph. Towards its end, the world faces another crisis. The new forests pull so much carbon dioxide from the air that the climate begins to cool. Nutrients washing from the new soils choke the seas, creating massive dead zones. A series of extinction pulses rocks the marine world, wiping out many of the spectacular reefs and armored fish. Yet, as always, life endures. The survivors, the jawed fishers, the early landwalkers, the forest builders, are poised to inherit a new world. The stage is set for the next great chapter, the Carboniferous period, an age of giant insects, vast coal swamps, and the definitive conquest of the continents. Thanks for joining this incredible journey. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to follow and subscribe for our next trip in the time machine. The dial on our time machine creeps onward. The Devonian period, with its first forests and fishy pioneers, fades behind us. Now, we slide into orbit above a very different Earth, about 359 million years ago. Welcome to the Carboniferous. From space, the first thing you notice is the color. The continents aren't the familiar browns and grays of bare rock. They are a deep, rich green, wrapped in vast bands of dense vegetation. Shallow seas flood the lowlands, and great river systems snake through dark, wet forests. This is a world obsessed with plants. Let's bring the machine down through the humid clouds, right into the heart of a carboniferous lowland. The air feels heavy, thick with moisture. Our console gives us the readings. Oxygen levels are much higher than today, while carbon dioxide is lower. The temperature is warm and stable, at least here in the tropics. We've landed in what's known as a coal swamp. Underfoot, the ground is soft and spongy, a waterlogged forest stretching for hundreds, maybe thousands of kilometers. And the plants, they look familiar at first, but then you realize how strange they truly are. Towering above us are lycopsid trees, like the mighty lepidodendron, reaching up 30 meters. They have scaly, diamond-patterned bark and a weird crown of spike-like leaves right at the top. We're also surrounded by dense thickets of calamites, which look like giant bamboo-like horsetail. Spreading their fronds into the muggy air are ancient tree ferns and seed ferns. There are no flowers here, no grasses. This is an older world, dominated by ferns, clubmasses and horsetails that have taken full advantage of the warm, wet climate. The forest floor is a chaotic tangle of fallen trunks, rotting leaves, and shallow, dark pools. The water here is acidic and low in oxygen, which means the usual decomposers, the fungi and bacteria, having a really hard time breaking everything down. The sheer volume of plant matter falling from above is just too much. So, layer upon layer of dead vegetation piles up in these swamps. It gets buried under mud and more plant debris. Away from the air, it doesn't fully rot. Instead, over millions of years, immense heat and pressure will transform these thick, peaty layers into coal. That's right. The black rock that will one day power human civilization is quietly being formed, right here, beneath our feet. This period isn't called the Carboniferous, the coal-bearing, for nothing. Now, about that high oxygen level, we're talking maybe 30 to 35%, compared to our modern 21%. This has a dramatic effect on life, especially for creatures that breathe differently from us. Insects and other arthropods, for instance, breathe through a network of tiny tubes called trachea. More oxygen in the air means that oxygen can diffuse deeper into their bodies, allowing them to grow to sizes that seem monstrous today. You don't have to wait long to see what I mean. A shadow passes over your head. You might mistake it for a bird, But then you remember there are no birds yet. You look up. It's a dragonfly-like insect, but its wingspan is as wide as your outstretched arms. This is Meganeura, one of the largest insects to have ever flown, with wings stretching over 70 centimeters. It's a predator, hunting other insects through the canopy, using its massive compound eyes to spot prey and its spiny legs to snatch it right out of the air. And it's not just the flyers. Down on the forest floor, something is crawling over the leaf litter. It looks like a millipede, except this one is the length of a small car. This is Arthropleura. Its segmented armor clacks faintly as it moves. It's a detritivore, feeding on the endless supply of dead plant material. Playing its part in this strange ecosystem, the undergrowth is teeming with giant cockroach relatives, early beetles, and scuttling arachnids that look like spiders and scorpions. In a world of high oxygen and dense forests, the arthropods are having their golden age. But the Carboniferous is also known as the age of amphibians. Let's step over to the edge of this swampy lake to see why. The water ripples, and a massive head breaks the surface. It looks like a bizarre cross between a salamander and a crocodile, with a broad, flat skull and eyes perched right on top. This is one of the large temnospondyl amphibians. Some of them grew several meters long and were the top vertebrate predators in these wetlands. They spent most of their time in the water, swimming with powerful tails, but they could also haul themselves onto land. Smaller amphibians, some looking more like lizards, others more like frogs, lurk along the riverbanks, feeding on the abundant insects, but they all share a common bond and a common weakness. They are still tied to the water. They lay their eggs in ponds or damp places. Their young hatch as gilled larvae, and their thin skins dry out easily. They are masters of the wetlands, but they can't stray too far from the water's edge. But evolution, as always, is working on a solution. Somewhere in these swamps, a group of early four-limbed animals is developing a radical innovation. The amniotic egg. Imagine an egg that doesn't have to be laid in water. It's a portable, personal pond. Inside its tough, flexible shell, the developing embryo is cushioned in a fluid-filled sac. It has its own food supply in a yolk sac, and a special membrane for breathing. This revolutionary design frees animals from their dependency on water for reproduction. They can now lay their eggs on dry land. The animals that possess this incredible adaptation are called the amniotes. In the Carboniferous, they are small, lizard-sized creatures, scurrying through the undergrowth and snapping up giant insects. Compared to the massive amphibians, they don't look very impressive, but they hold the key to the future. They can venture deeper into forests, across drier ground, and into new environments far from the swamps. The amphibians' reign as the dominant land vertebrates is about to be challenged. While life is undergoing these dramatic changes, the planet itself is not standing still. The continents continue their slow, relentless dance. Throughout the Carboniferous, the major land masses are drifting closer and closer together. By the end of this period, they will collide to form a single, vast supercontinent, Pangaea. This tectonic shuffling has massive consequences. Mountain ranges are rising where continents crash. New climate zones are being created. And as the planet's geography changes, so does its climate. For now, the tropical regions are still dominated by these steaming coal swamps. But in the southern hemisphere, on the supercontinent of Gondwana, ice ages are beginning. Glaciers advance and retreat, causing sea levels to rise and fall. The very swamps that created so much coal were also changing the climate by pulling huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere and burying it underground. As the Carboniferous draws to a close, the world is poised on a threshold. We have vast oxygen-rich forests, giant arthropods, and amphibian overlords. But we also have those small, unassuming amniotes, holding the evolutionary ace card. The continents are converging, setting the stage for a new world. The next period, the Permian, will see the full assembly of Pangaea, creating a world of harsh, dry interiors and intense monsoon coasts. The descendants of those first amniotes, the reptiles, and our own distant ancestors, the synapsids, will rise to dominate the land. And at the very end of it all, life will face the greatest catastrophe it has ever known. The hum of the time machine grows louder. The Carboniferous swamps, with their future coal beds and giant dragonflies, fade from view. The dial clicks forward, moving us toward a new era of giants, a world of extremes, and a planetary near-death experience. The Permian awaits. Thank you for joining this journey. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe for more adventures through deep time. The dial on our time machine clicks forward again, leaving the Carboniferous swamps behind. Through the window, the world's continents merge and twist into a new, legendary shape. It's the Permian period, spanning from about 299 to 252 million years ago. The map on the console updates, showing a single, immense landmass, Pangaea, from orbit. Earth is now split into two great realms. There's Pangaea, a giant C-shaped supercontinent, and Panthalassa, a vast superocean that wraps around almost everything else. A smaller sea, the Tethys, carves a bite into Pangaea's eastern side. This new geography has dramatic consequences. Vast interior regions are now thousands of miles from any coast, creating a climate of brutal extremes. We drop through the atmosphere over what will one day become Central Asia. The console flashes its readings. Summers are blisteringly hot, winters are bitterly cold, and the deep interior is incredibly arid, dominated by deserts and dry plains. Along the coasts, powerful monsoons rage. This is a far cry from the wet, swampy world we just left. Pangaea's sheer size has disrupted global air and ocean currents, making much of the inland world a harsh and unforgiving place. But for some creatures, this new world is an open invitation. Back in the Carboniferous, the first amniotes animals that lay shelled eggs were small and timid. Now, in the Permian, they explode in diversity, and one group, in particular, rises to the top. We land the time machine on a dry Permian plain and see them almost immediately. A bulky creature, about the size of a cow, lumbers past on for thick legs. It has a massive body and a short tail. This is a distant relative of the famous Dimetrodon, a heavy herbivore built to grind up tough, dry plants. And speaking of which, there's another synapsid nearby, Dimetrodon itself, the most famous predator of its time. Its most striking feature is that huge, sail-like fin on its back, which might have been used to regulate body temperature or for display. Now, Dimetrodon might look like a reptile, but don't be fooled. Synapsids are on the evolutionary line that leads to mammals, not lizards. Deep within their biology are the very first hints of what will one day become fur, warm-blooded metabolism, and complex teeth. The Permian is teeming with these mammal-like reptiles, from stocky plant-eaters to sleek, saber-toothed carnivores. For now, they rule the land. This is their time. But the synapsids don't have the world all to themselves. The other major branch of amniotes, the sauropsids, is also diversifying. These are the ancestors of all future reptiles, including dinosaurs and birds. On a sandy slope, we spot some small, lizard-like creatures basking in the sun. They're generally smaller than the big synapsids, but they're highly adaptable, finding ways to thrive in the niches the larger animals overlook. In the seas, the very first marine reptiles are beginning to appear, experimenting with a return to the water. An evolutionary arms race has begun between the synapsids and sauropsids. The synapsids are currently winning, but a catastrophe is coming that will completely change the game. Pangaea's new climate also transforms its plant life. The vast coal swamps of the Carboniferous are gone. In their place, in the wetter regions, are forests of seed ferns, conifers, and ginkgo-like trees, all better adapted to drier, seasonal conditions. But huge parts of Pangaea's interior aren't forested at all. They are semi-arid plains and true deserts, where only the toughest, most drought-resistant plants can survive. With the decline of the coal swamps, the process that buried massive amounts of carbon and supercharged the atmosphere with oxygen has slowed. Oxygen levels begin to drift down towards what we'd consider normal today. This marks the end of the age of giant insects. Arthropods are still everywhere. Airily beetles and cockroaches are scuttling about, but they're now closer to their modern sizes. The role of giant has been passed to the vertebrates. Let's dive beneath the waves of Panthalassa. The reefs here look different, often built by sponges and algae. Brachiopods and bryozoans still carpet the seafloor, and ammonoids, those beautiful coil-shelled relatives of squid, spiral through the water. Sharks and bony fish patrol the shallows. The Permian Ocean feels like a more refined version of earlier Paleozoic seas, but even here, there are subtle signs of stress. In some areas, oxygen levels are dropping, and species are starting to shift. The global ecosystem is resilient, but it's not invincible. All it needs is a push. Now, we fast forward the time machine to the very end of the Permian, about 252 million years ago. Warning lights begin to flash all over our console. In the region that will become Siberia, massive volcanic eruptions begin. For hundreds of thousands of years, an unbelievable amount of lava pours out, covering millions of square kilometers in dark basalt rock. This event is known as the Siberian Traps, but the lava is just one part of the disaster. The eruptions release staggering quantities of greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide and methane, into the atmosphere. This triggers runaway global warming. Ocean temperatures skyrocket. Weather patterns become chaotic. The deep oceans become anoxic-starved of oxygen. This allows certain microbes to thrive, releasing toxic hydrogen sulfide gas, which poisons the seas and shreds the ozone layer. The result is a devastating cascade of environmental collapse. Coral reefs vanish. Trilobites, survivors of multiple previous extinctions, are finally wiped out. On land, entire ecosystems unravel as plants and animals succumb to the extreme heat, acid rain, and toxic air. This is the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, nicknamed the Great Dying. It is the most severe extinction event in our planet's history. By the time the dust settles, the numbers are grim. About 96% of all marine species are gone. Around 70% of land vertebrate species have vanished. Even insects, which are usually incredibly resilient, suffer one of their only known mass die-offs. The great synapsid dynasties that ruled Pangaea for millions of years are shattered. Many of their lineages disappear forever. A few small hardy forms manage to cling on, hiding in the shadows of a broken world. The sauropsid reptiles also suffer heavy losses, but crucially, some of their lineages survive, and they will soon have their chance to shine. When the eruptions finally stop and the climate slowly begins to stabilize, Earth is an empty and silent planet. The lush forests are gone, replaced by fungal growth. The reefs are dead. The food webs are simple and broken. It will take at least 5 to 10 million years for life's diversity to fully recover. But as always, life finds a way. A handful of tough, adaptable survivors inherit this desolate world. Among them are a few synapsids that will eventually give rise to the first true mammals. And there are the surviving reptilian lineages that will evolve into the archosaurs, the group that includes crocodiles, pterosaurs, and, most importantly, the dinosaurs. In the silence after the disaster, evolution gets to work on a blank slate. Empty niches are an invitation for new experiments. As we watch the last red suns of the Permian set over a wounded planet, the dial on our time machine clicks past the Paleozoic era and into a new one, the Mesozoic, the age of reptiles. From the ashes of the Great Dying, new empires are about to rise. The worst extinction in Earth's history wasn't the end of the story, it was just the turning of a page. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next stop in the Triassic period. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through deep time. The dial on the time machine slides forward, settling on a new era, Mesozoic, meaning middle life. Our first stop, the Triassic period, stretching from about 252 to 201 million years ago. As the window clears, Earth comes into view. At first glance it looks a lot like the late Permian. There's still one enormous supercontinent, Pangaea, surrounded by the vast Panthalassa Ocean. The scars of the Great Dying, the largest extinction event in Earth's history, haven't faded yet. But as we look closer, something has changed. The world feels emptier, and in that emptiness, there's opportunity. The world is open. Let's bring the time machine down over the interior of Pangaea. The readouts tell the story of a planet in recovery. The climate is hot, seasonal, and often brutally dry. The coasts are pounded by powerful monsoon rains, while the vast interiors are dominated by deserts, scrublands, and open woodlands. Biodiversity is low compared to earlier ages, but it's slowly on the rise. Down on the dusty plains, the vegetation is sparse. We see patches of hardy conifers, seed ferns, and ginkgo-like trees. The lush, swampy forests of the Carboniferous are a distant memory. The ecosystems are rebuilding from a very small set of survivors. Look down there, in that rocky valley. That's one of the rulers of this new age, a sturdy creature called Elystrasaurus. It's about the size of a pig, with a beaked mouth and 2 prominent tusks. They waddle around in small herds, digging for roots and tough plants. Fossils of Elystrasaurus are found across modern-day Africa, India, and Antarctica, proving these continents were once joined together. For a short time after the extinction, animals like Lystrosaurus are everywhere. They're the ultimate survivors, thriving in the chaos, but the Triassic won't belong to them forever. As millions of years pass, new lineages rise from the surviving reptiles. Among them is a group that will define the entire Mesozoic era, the Archosaurs, or ruling reptiles. Archosaurs split into two major branches. One branch leads to crocodiles and their relatives. The other leads to pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and eventually, birds. Let's land the time machine near a Triassic floodplain. The air is thick with heat. Up ahead, a crocodile-like archosaur called Postosuchus stalks on all fours. Its body is armored, and its powerful jaws are filled with sharp teeth. It's not quite a crocodile, and not quite a dinosaur. It's an early top predator, testing out the archosaur body plan. Nearby, smaller, lighter archosaurs dart between the ferns. Some are running on two legs, using their long tails for balance. They're fast, with grasping hands and alert eyes. They aren't true dinosaurs yet, but they are getting very close. And what about our own ancestors, the synapsids? They're still around, but they've been overshadowed by the rising reptiles. We see them now as smaller, more nocturnal creatures. Among them are the cytodonts, dog-sized animals with some familiar features, different types of teeth and size, canines, and molars, more upright legs, and maybe even hints of whiskers and fur. It's possible they were even warm-blooded. These are our distant relatives, sticking to the shadows while the Archosaur sees the sunlit world. Finally, in the Middle and Late Triassic, the moment arrives. Dinosaurs become a reality. But they're not the towering giants you see in movies, not yet. The first dinosaurs are small to medium-sized, lightly built, and mostly bipedal. Imagine something the size of a large dog, with a long balancing tail and sharp claws. Early dinosaurs like Eoraptor or Herrerasaurus, found in South America, were probably quick hunters of small prey, about 1 to 4 meters long. Other early dinosaurs were herbivores, like Plateosaurus. This was a much larger, long-necked dinosaur, with powerful hind legs and shorter arms, allowing it to browse on higher vegetation. At this stage, dinosaurs are just one group among many Triassic reptiles. They shared the land with crocodile-line archosaurs, armored plant-eaters called etiosaurs, and large predators called rauisuchians that rivaled the early dinosaurs. If you could watch the Triassic plains at high speed, you'd see a constant reshuffling of ecosystems. For now, the dinosaurs are just one of many groups trying to make their mark. The revolution wasn't just happening on land. Over the coastal cliffs, we can spot the first pterosaurs launching into the air, with membranous wings supported by an elongated fourth finger. These winged lizards are the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. At first, they are small, more like large seabirds, skimming the water for fish or catching insects on the wing. And out in the ocean, another reptilian takeover is underway. Let's dive beneath the waves. Here, we meet ichthyosaurs, streamlined creatures that look remarkably like dolphins. They are reptiles that have fully returned to the sea, with limbs transformed into flippers, bodies built for speed, and they even gave birth to live young in the water. Alongside them, other marine reptiles like the long-necked nothosaurs hunt for fish and squid. The Triassic oceans are rapidly filling with new life. Back in the cockpit, we can see the bigger picture. The Triassic was a world of extremes. It was generally warm, with huge deserts in the interior of Pangaea and strong monsoons along the coasts. There were no permanent polar ice caps. Life had to adapt to these harsh, dry conditions. Plants like conifers, cycads, and seed ferns formed open woodlands instead of dense forests. Life had traded the endless swamps of the past for wide open spaces. For nearly 50 million years, the Triassic experimented with all these new forms of life. Then, just as things started to stabilize, disaster struck again. Around 201 million years ago, as Pangaea began to crack apart, massive volcanic eruptions unleashed unimaginable amounts of lava and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Once again, the climate warmed rapidly, the oceans became acidic, and food webs collapsed. This was the end Triassic mass extinction. Many groups were hit hard. Most of the large crocodile-line archosaurs vanished. So did many marine reptiles and other early dinosaur rivals. But some lineages weathered the storm better than others. Among the survivors were the dinosaurs. With much of their competition wiped out, they were free to radiate into all the newly vacant ecological roles. Small runners evolved into herd-forming giants. Agile predators grew into apex hunters. Also among the quiet survivors were the small, nocturnal synapsids, our ancestors. They continued to cling to the edges of this reptile-dominated world, evolving in the darkness, developing better hearing, warmer bodies, and more complex brains. When the dust of the end Triassic event finally settles, Earth enters a new, more familiar phase of the Mesozoic. Pangaea continues to split apart, creating separate continents and more diverse climates. And across these new landscapes, dinosaurs grow larger, more varied, and more numerous than ever before. From the cockpit of our time machine, we watch as the dial glows with a new name, Jurassicrane of the giants. The Triassic did its work. It took a shattered planet, rebuilt it, invented dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and marine reptiles, and then, with one final dramatic shakeup, it handed the world over to the towering stars of prehistory. The age of dinosaurs is about to begin in earnest. Thanks for joining this leg of the journey. If you enjoyed this trip through time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next stop, the Jurassic period. See you then. The dial on the time machine clicks forward with a soft, decisive thunk. The display reads, Mesozoic Middle Life, Second Act, Jurassic roughly 201 to 145 million years ago. Outside the window, Earth reappears, still recovering from the volcanic chaos that ended the Triassic. But this is not the same world we saw before. Lines of light track along the planet's surface as the continents begin to pull apart. Pangaea is cracking from orbit. We can watch long scars open in the crust, rift valleys, volcanic ridges, and widening seaway. The supercontinent is splitting into two great landmasses. In the north, there's Laurasia, which will become North America, Europe, and Asia. In the south, Gondwana, the future South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia. Between them, new oceans are being born. The Tethys Sea widens to the east, while the early Atlantic Ocean begins to seep between the separating plates. These massive changes reshape the global climate. More coastlines mean more moisture and milder temperatures. The extreme dry interiors of Pangaea shrink. Warm, humid zones expand, especially in the lower latitudes. On our console, the climate display glows green. This is a greenhouse world, no polar ice caps, high sea levels, and lush vegetation covering vast regions. Perfect conditions for something big. Let's bring the time machine down into a Jurassic Valley, somewhere that will one day be the western United States. The air is warm, almost subtropical. All around us rise magnificent conifer forest, all evergreen trees with needle-like leaves and thick sturdy trunks. Between them stand cycads with their thick palm-like crowns, and elegant ginkgo trees with their unique fan-shaped leaves. A carpet of ferns covers the forest floor. But look closely, there is still no grass, no flowers, and no fruit as we know it. These are ancient plant lineages, but they have formed true, layered, complex forests. Suddenly, we feel a low tremor in the ground. The leaves shiver. A branch snaps, with a sound like a breaking bone. Birds don't exist yet to scatter from the canopy, but something else is moving through the trees. A huge neck pushes slowly into view, followed by a small head perched atop a column of vertebrae. Behind it, a vast barrel-shaped body and four pillar-like legs. Its tail extends far behind, acting as a living counterbalance. This is a sauropod, one of the famous long-necked, plant-eating dinosaurs. Depending on exactly where and when we've landed, it could be a brachiosaurus or a These are the largest land animals Earth has ever produced. Some reached over 20 to 30 meters in length, their mass rivaling dozens of elephants. Their hearts had the incredible job of pumping blood all the way up those impossible necks. They browse high into the canopy, stripping leaves from conifers and cycads. Their sheer size is their best defense. Very few predators would dare challenge a full-grown adult. Herds of sauropods literally reshape the landscape just by existing, trampling paths through the forests, opening up clearings, and recycling vast amounts of plant material back into the ecosystem. The Jurassic is truly the age of giants. But where there are giant herbivores, there must be predators. On the edge of a clearing, we spot movement in the dappled light. A theropod bipedal, metating dinosaur steps forward, muscles shifting under its scaly skin. This might be something like an Allosaurus, a formidable hunter about 8 to 10 meters long, with powerful jaws and sharp claws. Theropods were the dominant carnivores of the Jurassic. They had light, hollow bones for speed and agility, three-toed hind feet, and grasping footlimbs. Their keen senses were perfect for spotting and ambushing prey. They hunted in forests and on floodplains, along riverbanks and coastal plains, tracking sauropods, stegosaurs, and smaller dinosaurs. Some may have hunted cooperatively, while others scavenged carcasses. All of them were lethal, but not all theropods were giants. Many were small, agile, and lightly built raptor-like forms that chased insects, lizards, and early mammals. And some of these smaller theropods carry a surprise: feathers. Not the broad flight feathers of modern birds, not yet, but fuzzy, filament-like coverings that provided insulation. In a world where some dinosaurs were beginning to warm their bodies internally, feathers were like useful thermos bottles. They may have also played roles in display with bright colors, patterns, and courtship rituals. It's from these small, feathered theropods that birds will eventually emerge. The Jurassic is also full of dinosaurs that look like they were designed by someone with a real fondness for spikes and plates. On an open plain, we encounter a stegosaur, perhaps the famous Stegosaurus itself. It has a row of large kite-shaped plates along its back, and a thagomizer of sharp spikes at the end of its tail. Its head is small, with simple teeth designed for cropping low-growing vegetation. The exact function of the plates is still debated by scientists. They might have been for display, species recognition, or even thermoregulation, acting like radiators to cool the animal down. Regardless, its silhouette is unmistakably an armored tank that defended itself not with speed, but with a spiky, swinging club of a tail. Elsewhere, we might see ornithopods, which were smaller, bipedal plant-eaters that were nimble and social. We might also find early ankylosaurs, low-slung, heavily armored herbivores, and even heterodontosaurs, fascinating dinosaurs with different types of teeth in the same jaw. The diversity of body plans is increasing. Dinosaurs are not just big lizards, they are experimenting with armor, crests, horns, and beaks. Now, let's look up against the bright Jurassic sky. Silhouettes pass overhead. These are pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. Some are small, with wingspans like modern gulls. Others, especially toward the end of the Jurassic, grow much larger. They have membrane wings, supported by a dramatically elongated fourth finger, and lightweight, hollow bones. Their eyesight was excellent, perfect for spotting prey from the air. They fished over lakes and seas, picked off small animals, and possibly even stole food from each other in mid-air squabbles. Their beaks and crests came in many fantastic shapes. And if we dive beneath the Jurassic Sea, we'll find a whole different collection of giants. Here, we'd encounter ichthyosaurs, sleek, dolphin-shaped reptiles with huge eyes and formidable jaws. We'd see plesiosaurs, some with incredibly long necks and small heads, others with shorter necks and massive skulls. Drifting and darting in spectacular diversity are the ammonites, those spiral-shelled relatives of modern squid. Early bony fish, sharks, and other marine hunters fill the waters. These marine reptiles are not dinosaurs, but they share the age with them, ruling their own vast domain below the waves. The oceans have finally regained their richness. With all this dinosaurian drama, it's easy to forget that our own lineage is still here, quietly waiting its time. As evening falls on the Jurassic forest, the big reptiles settle down. And then, in the dark, the mammals emerge. They are small mouse-sized, shrew-like, maybe the size of a badger in some cases. They have fur for insulation, high metabolisms, and large brains relative to their size. They scurry through the leaf litter, climb trunks, and hunt for insects. They live largely at night, when the great reptilian eyes are less of a threat. In this age, mammals are not kings, but they are gaining the traits that will one day let them outlast most of the dinosaurs: adaptability, warm-blooded endurance, and cleverness. The Jurassic period doesn't end with a catastrophic asteroid or raging lava fields. Instead, it tapers off with continued continental drift and gradually shifting climates. The Atlantic Ocean widens, and Laurasia and Gondwana drift further apart. As the Jurassic transitions smoothly into the Cretaceous, the dinosaurs remain diverse and dominant. Back in the cockpit, the time machine's dial moves again, ticking toward our next destination. The Cretaceous, a time of flowering worlds, and the eventual fall of the dinosaurs. We leave the Jurassic with the image of a long-necked sauropod silhouetted against a humid sky, pterosaurs wheeling overhead, and a tiny mammal slipping through the ferns at its feet, 3 threads of life that will tangle dramatically in what comes next. Thanks for joining this journey through time. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for our next stop in Earth's incredible history. See you in the Cretaceous. The time machine's dial clicks forward once more. The Jurassic fades from view, goodbye to the giant sauropods and graceful pterosaurs gliding over warm seas. When our view of Earth returns, it looks familiar, but busier. The continents have drifted further apart. New seas have flooded the lowlands, and the world is a patchwork of islands, inland seas, and coastal plains. The climate is still warm and ice-free, but something is different. The age of dinosaurs is at its absolute peak, and a quiet revolution is about to bloom. This is the Cretaceous, the final act of the Mesozoic era, lasting from about 145 to 66 million years ago. From our orbital viewpoint, we can trace the continents. Laurasia, in the north, has clearly split into North America and Eurasia. Gondwana, in the south, is fragmenting into South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. Between them, the Atlantic Ocean has widened, and the Great Tethys Sea still curls between the land masses, a warm corridor teeming with life. Sea levels are incredibly high, turning vast inland areas into shallow seas. Our climate display confirms it: no polar ice caps, warm global temperatures, and gentle seasons. It's a greenhouse Earth, and into this warmth, a new kind of life is taking root. Let's bring the time machine down into a Cretaceous forest. At first glance, it's the familiar Mesozoic cast: towering conifers, stout cycads, and a lush understory of ferns. But then, we spot something new: a shrub with broad, flat leaves, and at the tip of its stem, a cluster of small, colorful structures, petals, stamens, a seed enclosed in protective tissue. We're looking at one of the first flowering plants, the angiosperms. Compared to the ancient conifers, these newcomers are radical. They have a set of powerful evolutionary tricks: flowers to attract pollinators, enclosed seeds often wrapped in fleshy fruit for protection and dispersal, and broad leaves that capture sunlight with incredible efficiency. At first, they are just a small part of the landscape, but as millions of years pass, they spread everywhere along riverbanks, across open plains, and into disturbed soils. Some grow into massive trees, while others remain as small shrubs. They even learn to live in water, and the insects, they respond with enthusiasm. Bees, wasps, butterflies, and beetles flock to these new flowers, sipping nectar and carrying pollen. A grand co-evolutionary dance begins, as plants and insects shape each other's colors, scents, and behaviors. The world beneath the dinosaurs' feet is no longer just green and brown. Now, it is dotted with flowers. But don't think for a second that this new invention slowed the dinosaurs down. The Cretaceous wasn't their decline, it was their golden age. On a coastal plain in what will one day be North America, we see vast herds of hadrosaurs, the famous duck-billed dinosaurs. They have broad beaks for cropping plants and complex dental batteries for grinding tough vegetation. Some, like Parasaurolophus, sport elaborate head crests, possibly used for making sounds or for display. Nearby, a different kind of herbivore lumbers along. It's an ankylosaur, a living tank covered in bony plates and nodules, with a massive tail club capable of smashing a predator's leg. In another region, a herd of Triceratops grazes, their huge frills and sharp horns a formidable defense. These herbivores are the foundation of a massive ecosystem, shaping the landscape and providing food for the predators. And at the very top of that food chain, a familiar, terrifying shape. The ground begins to shake. A massive predator strides into view on 2 powerful legs, its tiny forearms held close to its body, and a heavy tail counterbalancing a gigantic skull. Tyrannosaurus rex. Late in the Cretaceous, T-Rex and its relatives were the undisputed rulers of western North America. Their skulls were over 1 meter long, with jaws designed to crush bone. They hunted large herbivores, like hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, using their keen senses of smell and vision. But T-Rex wasn't the only giant hunter. In North Africa, the semi-aquatic Spinosaurus hunted fish. In South America, the massive Giganotosaurus prowled the plains. and all around the globe, smaller, faster raptors, many covered in feathers, hunted in clever packs. In fact, by this time, true birds descendants of these small theropods were already flying in the skies, diversifying into new forms. The classic dinosaur world we all imagine, the horned dinosaurs, the duck-billed herds, the mighty T-Rex. This world belongs to the late Cretaceous. The action wasn't just on land. Let's dive beneath the waves of a shallow Cretaceous sea. Schools of fish flicker past, and coiled ammonites drift through the water. But then, the light dims as a colossal shadow passes overhead. It's a mosasaur. These were not dinosaurs, but giant marine lizards, relatives of modern snakes and monitor lizards. With torpedo-shaped bodies, flipper-like limbs, and powerful tails, they were the apex predators of the Cretaceous seas. The largest grew up to 17 meters long, hunting fish, turtles, and even other marine reptiles. The once dominant ichthyosaurs had already vanished, but plesiosaurs with their long necks still shared the oceans. For tens of millions of years, this world thrived. Dinosaurs diversified, flowering plants spread, and in the shadows, mammals were quietly evolving. They were still small, mostly shrew to badger-sized, but they were more diverse than ever, living as burrowers, climbers, and gliders. They lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, but they were ready, waiting for an opportunity. And a colossal change was on its way. Deep beneath what will one day be the Gulf of Mexico, a massive asteroid, about 10 kilometers across, is on a collision course with Earth. At the same time, the planet is experiencing intense volcanic activity and shifting sea levels. Some ecosystems are already showing signs of stress. None of these things by itself is world-ending, but together, they will create a catastrophe. Let's set the time machine to the final day of the Cretaceous, 66 million years ago, hovering above the Yucatan Peninsula. It's an ordinary day. Hadrosaurs are grazing, a T-Rex patrols a riverbank, and small birds call from the trees. Then, a new light appears in the sky. At first, it's just a bright star, but it grows brighter and brighter, becoming a blazing fireball streaking through the atmosphere. The impact is unimaginable. The asteroid slams into the shallow sea with the force of billions of atomic bombs, carving out a crater 180 kilometers wide. The immediate effects are apocalyptic: supersonic blast waves, mega-earthquakes, and tsunamis hundreds of meters high. But the long-term effects are even worse. Dust, soot, and aerosols are thrown into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. Photosynthesis stops, an impact winter begins. Temperatures plunge, and darkness falls for months, possibly years. The great dinosaurs, dependent on a constant supply of food, cannot survive. Herbivores starve, and the carnivores soon follow. In the oceans, the collapse of the plankton food chain wipes out the giant marine reptiles and countless other species. By the time the dust settles and sunlight returns, roughly 3/4 of all species on Earth are gone. All non-avian dinosaurs, pterosaurs, mosasaurs, ammonites, all vanished in a geological instant. But life is resilient. Some lineages manage to survive: the small, feathered dinosaurs we call birds, crocodilians, turtles, lizards, and snakes. And of course, the small mammals, who could hide in burrows and survive on insects and scraps. When they emerged, they found a world stripped of its giants. Empty niches were everywhere, waiting to be filled. Back in our cockpit, the time machine's dial ticks over. The Mesozoic era dims, and a new light appears. Cenozoic new life. The Cretaceous gave the world flowering plants, birds, and the most spectacular dinosaurs imaginable. And then, in one cosmic accident, it cleared the board for something new. Ahead of us lies the age of mammals, and eventually, the rise of a clever primate who would dig up these bones and wonder what happened to the monsters. The age of dinosaurs is over. Our age is about to begin. Thanks for joining me on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more adventures into Earth's deep past. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through time. The dial on our machine slides past the Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs, and locks onto a new era, the Cenozoic, our first stop, the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, a world recovering from catastrophe and buzzing with new possibilities. From roughly 66 to 34 million years ago, outside, the age of dinosaurs has just ended in fire and shadow. The Chicxulub impact is over, and the dust has begun to settle. As Earth comes back into view, the world looks bruised, but it is far from empty. We bring the time machine down into what will one day be North America. Just a few 100,000 years after the impact, the air feels cooler and dimmer than in the Cretaceous, but it's no longer choked with ash. On the ground, delicate green shoots are pushing through a thick carpet of dead wood. Ferns are spreading everywhere. This is a fern spike, a phenomenon that often follows massive forest fires. These plants are nature's first responders, colonizing devastated land and kick-starting the recovery. Look closer, and you'll see the survivors. Small, scruffy birds, the direct descendants of the last dinosaurs, flit between sprouting branches, pecking at seeds and insects. In the sluggish rivers, crocodiles lurk, little changed, as if the apocalypse were just another bad season. Turtles bask on muddy banks, their armor having served them well. And in the shadows, something new is stirring. Small fur-covered creatures creep out from burrows and hollow logs. They move cautiously, sniffing the air with twitching noses. These are our ancestors, the mammals. During the dinosaur age, most were stuck on the night shift, forced to be small and secretive. But now, with the great reptiles gone, that ceiling has been shattered. The Paleocene, from 66 to 56 million years ago, is their moment to shine. Let's fast forward a few million years. The world has healed. The forests have grown back, dense and lush. Flowering plants, which had been gaining ground in the Cretaceous, are now joined by palms and broadleaf trees. There are still no grasslands. This is a planet of forests and jungles. And among the branches, early primates appear. They're small, squirrel-like animals, with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes, perfectly adapted for life in the trees. On the forest floor, other mammals are evolving into strange, early hoofed forms. Some are dog-sized browsers, while others are larger, with more complex teeth, for grinding tough plants. These aren't yet horses or deer, but they're the rough drafts. Predators are evolving too. Small, agile hunters stalk the understory, but the true cats and dogs we know are still many millions of years in the future. Meanwhile, in South America, a different story is unfolding. The continent is an isolated island, a closed arena where unique mammals diversify in parallel. Here, giant terror birds will eventually rise fast-running, flightless predators with massive beaks, filling the niche left empty by large carnivores. The Paleocene is quieter than the dinosaur ages, but evolution is working overtime. The main branches of the mammalian family tree are splitting and growing, setting the stage for the rest of the season. Near the end of the Paleocene, something strange happens. On our time machine's display, the temperature gauge spikes. Atmospheric carbon shoots upward. This is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETIM. The cause is still debated, perhaps massive volcanic eruptions or a sudden release of methane from the seafloor. Whatever the trigger, global temperatures soared by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. Polar regions became almost subtropical. But unlike the asteroid impact, this event didn't cause a mass extinction. Instead, it was like an evolutionary accelerator. Some mammals responded by getting smaller, a phenomenon called dwarfing, which helps to shed heat. Others simply moved towards the cooler poles. When the PETIM passes, the world remains warmer than before. We have now entered the Eocene epoch, from about 56 to 34 million years ago. This is a true greenhouse Earth, thick with life. Let's drop the time machine near the Arctic Circle. We're expecting ice and tundra, right? Instead, we step into a swampy, forested world. Tall, broadleaf trees mingle with ferns. Fossil evidence confirms this. Eocene polar regions were home to temperate, even subtropical forests, complete with crocodile relatives and turtles. The planet is almost entirely ice-free and warm. Shallow seas flood the continents. For mammals, this is paradise. They explode into new forms, seizing every opportunity. On a forested plain in North America, we spot a small animal, about the size of a fox, moving through the underbrush. It has multiple toes on each foot. This is an early horse, sometimes called Eohippus. It's not grazing on grass because grasslands don't really exist yet. Instead, it browses on leaves in forest clearings. Over tens of millions of years, its descendants will grow larger, adapt to drier habitats, and evolve the single-toed hooves we recognize today. As the sun sets, look up. Dark shapes flutter overhead. These aren't pterosaurs, these are bats, the first true flying mammals. They are an evolutionary marvel, with membrane wings stretched between elongated fingers and an early form of echolocation to navigate the night sky. Mammals have conquered the air, but the greatest mammalian experiment of the Eocene is happening in the oceans. On a coastal shore in what will become Pakistan, we see a wolf-sized animal with long legs and a snout, splashing in the shallows. This is Cretaceous, one of the earliest known relatives of whales. If we follow its lineage forward, we witness one of the most astonishing transformations in the history of life. Limbs shorten into paddles, nostrils migrate to the top of the skull to become blowholes, bodies streamline, and tails gain powerful flukes. By the middle of the Eocene, creatures like Basilosaurus appear long, serpentine whales up to 18 meters long, fully at home in the open ocean. Mammals, once confined to the shadows, now rule the depths. Of course, mammals aren't the only ones thriving. Birds diversify rapidly, with early forms of waterfowl, owls, and parrots appearing. Crocodilians enjoy the warm, wet climates, living far beyond their modern tropical homes. Reptiles and birds are still important, but the center of gravity has shifted. The largest and most diverse land animals are now mammals. The reptiles' long empire has quietly ended. A new dynasty rules the continents. But near the end of the Eocene, our climate readings begin to wobble again. Temperatures slowly trend downward. Antarctica, once cloaked in forest, begins to cool as ocean currents shift. The opening of a deep-water passage around the continent will soon isolate it, allowing massive ice sheets to form for the first time. The greenhouse Earth is preparing to switch, gradually, into an icehouse Earth. Ahead lie chapters of cooling, the spread of vast grasslands, giant ice age beasts, and the eventual rise of our own lineage. But for now, as the Eocene sun sets over steaming forests and newly evolved whales breach offshore, the age of mammals is just getting started. The dial moves toward our next destination, the Oligocene and Miocene. The world is about to get cooler, drier, and eventually, more familiar. Thanks for joining this leg of the journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe for our next trip through time. The time machine's dial clicks one last time, settling on the final chapters of deep time before human history begins. The Cenozoic era, the age of new life. We're about to witness the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs. The warm Miocene world, with its endless grasslands and diverse apes, is fading. As Earth reappears in our window, it looks astonishingly familiar, almost like home. This is the Pliocene, starting around 5.3 million years ago. From orbit, the continents have nearly settled into their modern positions. North and South America are finally linked by the Isthmus of Panama. Africa is pressed firmly against Eurasia, sealing the ancient Tethys Sea for good. Antarctica is wrapped in ice, and Greenland is beginning to build its own formidable ice cap. The climate is cooler than the Miocene, but still warmer than today. Lush forests, woodlands, and vast grasslands stretch across the continents. Seasons are distinct, and while the poles have ice, the great ice sheets that will define the next age haven't fully formed yet. Let's bring the time machine down for a closer look, landing on an African savanna. Golden grass ripples in the wind, with scattered acacia-like trees dotting the horizon. In the distance, herds of grazers move. There are early zebras, already striped and watchful. Ancestors of antelope and gazelle, impossibly light on their feet. Even early giraffe relatives, their necks not yet stretched to the extreme lengths we know. And where there are grazers, there are hunters. Saber-toothed cats with their deadly canines stalk through the tall grass. Early hyenas, with jaws powerful enough to crush bone, patrol the landscape. Packs of wild dog ancestors hunt with coordinated precision. This is the blueprint for the modern African savanna, but everything feels bigger, heavier, more species, more massive animals, and notably, no humans in sight. But wait, at the edge of a cluster of trees, something different is moving. A small group of primates is advancing cautiously from one patch of shade to the next. They aren't just swinging through branches anymore. Their arms are shorter than forest apes, their legs are longer, and they hold their spines more upright. Every few steps, they straighten up completely and walk on two legs. These are hominins, the members of our own family tree after it split from the chimpanzee line. This is a group like Australopithecus. They stand about 1 meter to 1.5 meters tall. Their brains are larger than a chimp's, but still much smaller than ours. Their hands are capable of precise manipulation, and their feet are adapted for walking upright, though they can still scramble up a tree if they need to. They thrive in these mosaic environments, a mix of woodland and open grass. Standing tall helps them spot predators over the savanna, travel more efficiently between food sources, and carry things in fan's food, or even the first simple tools. Some of them are beginning to shape stone. It's not much at first, just sharp flakes knocked from a rock to cut meat from a carcass or scrape a hide. But it's a revolutionary start. Culture, even in this simple form, is becoming a key part of their survival. The story is getting closer now. We can feel it. Meanwhile, that new land bridge, the Isthmus of Panama, is doing more than just changing ocean currents. It's connecting North and South America to continents that had been isolated for tens of millions of years. What follows is the Great American Biotic Interchange. From the north, horses, camels, cats, dogs, and bears stream south. From the south, giant ground sloths, armadillos, and their enormous armored relatives, the glyptodonts, head north. An epic biological battle for resources and territory begins. The world's ecosystems are becoming more connected, more dynamic. The stage is being set for the ice ages. The dial on our time machine slides forward again. Pleistocene inside the cockpit. The climate graph transforms into a jagged saw blade, sharp peaks and deep valleys, like a frantic heartbeat. These are the glacial-interglacial cycles. During the glacial's massive ice sheets, kilometers thick, bury much of North America and Eurasia. In the warmer interglacials, the ice retreats. This rhythm, driven by tiny shifts in Earth's orbit and tilt, will now dominate the planet's climate. We drop into a full glacial period. The world is cold and dry. Sea levels have plummeted, exposing land bridges like the one connecting Siberia and Alaska. Endless, frigid grasslands, the mammoth steppe stretch from Spain all the way to North America. Trees are scarce, clinging to sheltered valleys. But this harsh world is anything but empty. It's the age of megafauna. Woolly mammoths, with their immense, curving tusks and shaggy coats, dominate the plains. Woolly rhinoceroses, huge bison, and herds of wild horses are everywhere, and hunting them are some of the most formidable predators ever known. Saber-toothed cats like Smilodon in the Americas, cave lions, giant short-faced bears, and powerful packs of wolves. The Americas have their own giants, ground sloths the size of small elephants, and armored glyptodonts, like living tanks. Australia has a bizarre cast of its own, with giant kangaroos, marsupial lions, and enormous wombat-like creatures called diptodonts. This world feels raw, oversized, a realm sculpted by cold and hunger. And into this world, a new force is stepping onto the stage, us. Back in Africa, through the late Pliocene and early Pleistocene, our hominin ancestors continued to evolve. Brain sizes steadily increased. Stone tools became more sophisticated, moving from simple flakes to beautifully crafted hand axes. Bodies became fully adapted for long-distance walking and running. Species like Homo habilis and then Homo erectus appeared. Homo erectus, in particular, was a great traveler, spreading far out of Africa and across Eurasia. These early humans learned to control fire, a game-changer for warmth, protection, and cooking. Cooking food unlocked more calories and nutrients, which in turn may have fueled further brain growth. Finally, around 300,000 years ago, in Africa, our own species appears. Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans. We weren't alone yet. Other human species, like the Neanderthals in Europe and the Denisovans in Asia, still walked the earth. But we had a special combination of traits: flexible cooperation in large groups, complex language, and symbolic thought. Armed with these abilities, we began to spread. Through the time machines, simulations, we watch as humans radiate across the globe, out of Africa, across Asia, down into Australia, into Europe, where they met, and even interbred with Neanderthals, and eventually, across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. Everywhere we went, we changed the rules. We hunted the largest animals with coordinated strategies and deadly new weapons. But as we expanded, something tragic happened. The great megafauna began to disappear. In Australia, the Americas, and on islands, the arrival of humans coincides strikingly with the extinction of mammoths, giant sloths, and countless other giants. The warming climate at the end of the last ice age certainly played a role, but the pattern is hard to ignore. By the end of the Pleistocene, the world of giants was gone. The planet became quieter, smaller, and increasingly dominated by one very clever primate. About 11,700 years ago, the last glacial period ended. The Pleistocene gave way to the Holocene, the warm, stable interglacial period we live in now. The great ice sheets retreated, sea levels rose, and the climate stabilized enough for humans to invent agriculture, build cities, and create civilizations. Back in the cockpit, the time machine's dial moves past Pleistocene and Holocene to a new, faint label that some scientists have proposed: the Anthropocene, the age of humans. We've watched Earth's entire 4.5 billion year journey, from molten rock to a living world. Now, the story has caught up with us. The next chapter is no longer about strange beasts in distant ages. It's about our age, our impact, and the story we choose to write on this ancient planet. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for our final journey into the age of humans. The time machine's dial slides past Pleistocene with a soft click. The Cenozoic era, the age of new life, is in its final chapter. Outside the window, the last great ice sheets are retreating. A few mammoths still wander in cold refuges, but the world is thawing, and one particular species of ape is about to rewrite the rules of the entire planet. We bring the time machine down somewhere in the Near East, about 12,000 years ago. The air is cool but no longer glacial. Patches of forest and open grasslands stretch across rolling hills. We see herds of wild gazelle, aurochs, the ancestors of modern Catalan, wild donkeys moving warily through the landscape. The giants of the Ice Age are mostly gone, lingering only in isolated pockets. On a hillside overlooking a river, a small band of Homo sapiens is at work. Some return from a hunt, while others gather seeds and edible plants. They know which patches of wild grain will ripen soon. They carry stone tools, wear animal skins, and gather around a communal fire. Their language is complex, their stories reaching back many generations. This new epoch is the Holocene, which started about 11,700 years ago. Geologically, it's just another warm period between ice ages. But for humans, it's the cradle of civilization. The key gift of the Holocene is climate stability. Temperatures still fluctuate, but not as wildly as they did during the glacial swings. Rainfall becomes more predictable, and ecosystems stabilize enough for long-term planning. For a species that can think ahead, this is a golden opportunity. Let's fast forward a few thousand years. The same river valley has changed. Wild stands of wheat and barley are no longer entirely wild. Humans have started protecting them, pulling out competing plants and scaring away grazing animals. They've begun deliberately planting harvested seeds in the best spots. Over time, people unknowingly apply evolutionary pressure. They select grains that are larger and easier to harvest, and plants that don't drop their seeds too early. Slowly but surely, traits useful to humans become dominant. This slow partnership between humans and plants is the birth of agriculture, and it doesn't just happen here. It emerges independently all over the world. In the Fertile Crescent, it's wheat, barley, and lentils. In China, it's rice and millet. In the Americas, it's maize, beans, and potatoes. And in Africa, it's sorghum and yams. Wherever agriculture appears, it has similar, world-changing effects. First, a food surplus, more calories produced per acre of land. This leads to population growth, allowing more humans to survive and raise children. People no longer need to constantly wander. They build sedentary lives in villages, which grow into towns, and then cities. This also leads to specialization. When not everyone has to be a farmer, some people can become artisans, traders, priests, rulers, or soldiers. We move the time machine above Mesopotamia, then the Nile, the Indus Valley, and the Yellow River. In each place, we see the marks of this new way of life: irrigation channels, granaries, city walls, and temples. Humans are physically rearranging landscapes, cutting forests for timber, plowing vast fields, and damming rivers. For the first time, the geological record begins to bear the clear, unmistakable marks of a single species' daily habits. The Holocene flickers by in an accelerated montage. We watch the first cities emerge: Uruk, Memphis, Mohenjo-daro. Later, Athens, Rome, Teotihuacan, Angkor. Writing systems appear to keep track of trade, laws, and history. The Bronze Age gives way to the Iron Age, reshaping warfare and labor. Empires form, expand, and crumble. The Akkadians, Egyptians, Persians, Romans, Maya, and countless Chinese dynasties. From our high vantage point in the time machine, millennia flash past like seconds. To the people living through them, each empire feels eternal. From Earth's perspective, they are just surface ripples. But even so, the human footprint deepens. Vast forests in Europe, China, and the Americas are cut down or burned for farmland. Wetlands are drained. Wild animals are pushed back or hunted to local extinction. Still, even at the height of the great ancient empires, the global human population is measured in millions, not billions. Their energy comes mostly from muscle, both human and animal, land, from burning wood, wind and water power their sailing ships and mills. The carbon they release is significant locally, but on a global scale, the climate remains remarkably stable. That stability, however, is about to end. Let's jump forward to England in the late 18th century. A new kind of heat is spreading. Coal fires in furnaces and boilers. Humans have begun mining and burning this black rock at an unprecedented scale, using it to power steam engines. This is the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. From our viewpoint, the change is breathtaking. Coal consumption skyrockets. Factories bloom along rivers. Railways stitch the landscape together. Cities swell as people leave farms for industrial jobs. Soon, this revolution spreads to Western Europe, North America, Japan, and eventually, the entire world. In the 19th and 20th centuries, another fossil fuel joins the party: oil, and later, natural gas. With them come cars, trucks, and airplanes. Global shipping connects every corner of the planet. We get plastics, modern fertilizers, and new medicines. Human population, which took all of history to reach 1 billion, suddenly rockets past 2, 3, 4, all the way to 8 billion in just a couple of centuries. The speed of this change is astonishing, and our time machine-esque climate instruments show another curve beginning to steepen: the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. For most of the Holocene, it hovered around 280 parts per million. Suddenly, it shoots upward. The planet's greenhouse blanket is getting thicker. Earth has a new agent of rapid climate change, and this time, it's not volcanoes or asteroids. Scientists debate what to call this new age, and when exactly it began. But from our perspective, in the time machine, a new phase is obvious. Let's call it the Anthropocene, the age of humans. What makes it so different? We run a scan of the planet's surface. The signatures are unmistakable. A sharp spike in atmospheric carbon and methane from burning fossil fuels, synthetic polymers, plastics accumulating in rivers, oceans, and soils, a distinct global layer of radioactive particles from nuclear weapons tests, and vast artificial rock layers of concrete, asphalt, and steel covering huge swaths of land. The rate of extinction is skyrocketing, comparable to past mass extinctions. Every year, we humans now move more sediment and rock through mining and construction than all the world's rivers combined. We've dammed most of the planet's major rivers, rerouting water cycles and altering the chemistry of the atmosphere and oceans. In the language of deep time, this is a geological shaka change compressed into centuries, not millions of years. Let's land in a modern city in the early 21st century. Skyscrapers scrape the clouds. The night glows with artificial light. Vehicles stream along highways, burning fuel extracted from rocks laid down in ancient swamps hundreds of millions of years ago. Yet beneath the pavement, the same earth persists. Tectonic plates still drift. The mantle still drift. The mantle still churns. Continents still erode, grain by grain, into the sea. But the systems are under stress. Coral reefs are bleaching in warming, acidifying oceans. Polar ice sheets are retreating, revealing rocks that last saw sunlight millions of years ago. For the first time, a single species holds in its hands the power to trigger a mass extinction, or to prevent one, to stabilize the climate, or push it into chaos, to restore ecosystems, or replace them with simplified artificial ones. No asteroid is incoming. No supervolcano is currently erupting. The main driver of rapid planetary change is us. Let's sit back in the cockpit and zoom the timescale all the way out. And yet, in that spark, one species figured out how to read the planet's history in rocks and ice. We learned how to measure our own impact, and we learned how to imagine different futures, both disastrous and hopeful. The time machine hums softly, waiting. Behind us lies a universe of lost oceans, vanished continents, trilobites, dinosaurs, and mammoths. Ahead of us lies a blank space, a script not yet written. Whatever future chapters Earth will have, whether they are about recovery and balance, or about further upheaval, will depend largely on the choices made by the storytelling ape that learned to look back through time and ask, what happens next? Thanks for watching. If you want to continue this journey through time with us, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one. The time machine is quiet. No more jumps are cued on the dial. You've just watched 4.5 billion years flash by, fire and ocean, supercontinents and ice, trilobites, dinosaurs, mammoths, and humans. You've seen seas appear where mountains once stood, and mountains rise where oceans once rolled. But a question hangs in the air. How do we know any of this? There were no cameras in the Cambrian period, no eyewitnesses to the Permian extinction, no human scribes to record the first green leaves or the last non-avian dinosaur. And yet, here we are, talking about dates 252 million years ago, 66 million years ago, 11,700 years ago. If someone had been counting all along, you rest your hand on the console. Outside the bubble of the time machine, there is only one record of Earth's journey, the planet itself. Imagine turning off the time machine and stepping into an ordinary field, anywhere on modern Earth. To most people, it's just soil and rock. But to a geologist, it's the cover of a vast, layered book. Under your feet, hidden beneath grass and concrete, lie sedimentary layers from ancient lakes and seas, volcanic ash from long-vanished eruptions, and the fossilized remains of shells, bones, and pollen. Each layer is a page, written in a language of grains, chemistry, and structure. By learning to read that language, scientists have reconstructed the entire story you've just watched unfold. Think back to the first chapter of our journey, a molten Earth under constant bombardment. You didn't see any rocks older than about 4 billion years, because most have been recycled by plate tectonics. But a few stray crystal-tiny grains of zircon have been found that are 4.4 billion years old. Their chemistry tells us they cooled from molten rock in the presence of liquid water. Just from a grain of sand-sized crystal, we can read. By this time, Earth already had oceans. That's how this works. Tiny clues, carefully decoded. The first big idea in geology is painfully simple, but revolutionary. It's called the law of superposition. In an undisturbed stack of sedimentary rocks, the bottom layers are always older than the top layers. It seems obvious new mud settles on top of old mud, but once someone took this seriously, rocks turned into timelines. A cliff exposing different layers becomes a vertical calendar. The bottom is the oldest, the middle is intermediate, and the top is the youngest, closest to our time. Of course, the Earth is messy. Layers get tilted, folded, and broken. Rivers cut through them, glaciers scrape them away, and magma forces its way in. But geologists have principles to untangle this mess, like reconstructing a shredded book by matching the torn edges. These principles don't give exact numbers, but they do give us the order of events. First, this happened, then that, then this. This is how the early geologic timescale was built, by comparing rock types and fossils from all over the world. And speaking of fossils, remember those trilobites from the Phanerozoic, or the ammonites spiraling through Mesozoic seas? They're long gone, except they left traces. Bones, shells, teeth, leaf impressions, burrows, even fossilized footprints. When geologists noticed that different layers contained different kinds of fossils and that certain fossils only appeared in specific beds, they realized something profound. Fossil groups change in a consistent, predictable order through rock layers. Trilobites appear, diversify, then vanish. Ammonites rise and fall. Dinosaurs dominate and then disappear. This pattern is global. So, you can use certain fossils as index fossils. These are species that lived for a relatively short time but were widespread. If you find the same index fossil in rocks in France and in China, you know those rocks are roughly the same age, even if you don't know the exact number of years. This method, called biostratigraphy, turns scattered rock outcrops into synchronized chapters of a single, global story. For centuries, geologists knew the order of events: Cambrian before Jurassic, Permian before Triassic. But they didn't know how long ago those ages were. Some guessed thousands of years, others suspected millions, but they had no way to prove it. Then came physics. Certain elements, like uranium and potassium, are unstable. Their atoms, slowly and predictably, break down into new, more stable elements. This decay happens at a fixed rate, described by a half-life. the time it takes for half of the parent atoms to decay into daughter atoms. When a crystal forms in cooling rock, it locks in a specific amount of these parent atoms. Over time, as they decay, daughter atoms accumulate. By measuring how much parent isotope is left and how much daughter isotope has been created, and knowing the half-life, scientists can calculate exactly when that crystal formed. This is radiometric dating. Suddenly, the relative time scale gained hard numbers. The oldest rocks were dated to over 4 billion years. The Cambrian explosion was pegged at around 541 million years ago. The Great Permian extinction at 252 million years ago. The end of the dinosaurs at 66 million years ago. Those dates you've been seeing on the time machine's dial. They come from these atomic clocks, cross-checked by many methods and in many locations. For more recent history, other clocks step in. In ice cores drilled from Antarctica and Greenland, each year's snowfall gets compacted into a distinct layer. You can literally count them like tree rings. Dark and light bands show the changing seasons. Tiny bubbles of air trap, samples of the ancient atmosphere. Layers of dust or volcanic ash mark specific global events. Some ice cores go back more than 800,000 years, giving us a detailed record of temperature, greenhouse gases, and climate swings. Tree rings offer annual records for the past tens of thousands of years where old wood is preserved. Wide rings show good years. Narrow rings show droughts. Scars mark fires and insect outbreaks. In the oceans, microscopic shells of plankton record changes in temperature and chemistry. Even cave formations, stalagmites, and stalactites can be dated and used to reconstruct rainfall histories. The closer we get to the present, the more of these overlapping records we have. If you step back and look at the full geological timescale, it's like a table of contents for Earth's biography. We have eons, the biggest chunks of time, then eras, like the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic, then periods, like the Jurassic or Cretaceous, and then even finer slices, like epochs and ages. Most of the names come from old places, languages, or ideas. Cambrian comes from Cambria, the Latin name for Wales. Jurassic, from the Jura Mountains in Europe. Cretaceous from Creta*, the Latin word for chalk. They are human labels, but the boundaries they mark are very real: mass extinctions, major climate shifts, and huge reorganizations of life, all preserved in the stone record. The time machine hums softly as you let all of this sink in. Everything you saw on your journey, fiery beginnings, freezing snowball Earths, dinosaur kingdoms, and glowing cities, was reconstructed from these clues. Layers of rock, fossils, tiny isotopic ratios, ice bubbles, and tree rings. Earth keeps the receipts. And now, in our own time, the Anthropocene, we're adding our own unmistakable chapter. A spike in carbon dioxide and methane. A global layer of plastic and industrial chemicals. A thin worldwide dusting of concrete, steel, and radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests. If some future intelligence were to build their own time machine and look back, they wouldn't see us directly, but they would absolutely see what we left behind in the rocks. You glance at the dormant dial one last time. Geology, in the end, is the art of listening to a planet that cannot speak, and yet has written its entire life story into stone, ice, and dust. We used physics, chemistry, biology, and a lot of patient observation to turn that silent record into the epic story we VHs traveled through. And now that we know how to read the book under our feet, there's one more question the time machine can't answer for us. Knowing what came before, what kind of chapter do we choose to write next? Thanks for joining this journey through time. If you're curious to learn more about our planet's incredible story, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. See you in the next one. Imagine you're sitting in a time machine. The dial isn't zipping through centuries anymore. Instead, it's resting on a single, glowing word: extinctions. You've witnessed it all. You've seen life explode in a kaleidoscope of forms. You've watched primeval forests spread like green fire, coral reefs build underwater cities, dinosaurs shake the ground, and mammoths roam frozen plains. You've even seen humanity paint the night sky with electric light. But running through this epic story, like deep cracks in the Earth's crust, are a handful of moments when the music almost stopped. We call them the 5 great mass extinctions. Now, what is a mass extinction? Really, species go extinct all the time. It's a natural part of evolution, like old leaves falling from a tree. Most disappear quietly, outcompeted, or unable to adapt to slow changes. But a mass extinction is a different beast entirely. It's a planetary system crash. It's when extinction rates skyrocket, wiping out huge numbers of species in a geological blink of an eye. The losses are global, affecting life in the oceans, on land, and in the air. Entire evolutionary branches are pruned away forever. There have been many extinction events, but 5 stand out as the planet's biggest oh no moments. So let's adjust the time machine dial. We're going to visit them as snapshots of a planet in crisis. First stop, the end of Evolution extinction, about 444 million years ago. We arrive in a world where life is almost entirely confined to the oceans. The seas are teeming with bizarre-looking trilobites, clam-like brachiopods, and the very first primitive fish. The land is mostly barren rock, with just a hint of green from early mosses. Then, the climate does a complete backflip. A short, brutal ice age descends. Massive ice sheets spread across the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, locking up vast amounts of water. Sea levels plummet, draining the shallow seas where most life thrives. It's like pulling the plug on a bathtub full of creatures. Their homes are either gone or frozen. Then, just as suddenly, the ice melts. Sea levels surge, flooding the coasts with water that is stratified and starved of oxygen. Between the freezing and the chaotic thaw, about 85% of marine species vanish. It's a devastating blow. Let's jump forward to the late Devonian, around 375 million years ago. This is the age of fishes. The oceans are dominated by giant armored placoderms and early sharks. On land, something incredible is happening. The first true forests are rising, with deep-rooted trees transforming the landscape. The air buzzes with insects. A few brave vertebrates are beginning to explore the boundary between water and land. But this isn't a sudden catastrophe. It's a slow, grinding disaster that stretches over millions of years. The new forests, with their deep roots, are changing how rock weathers, washing huge amounts of nutrients into the sea. This triggers massive algal blooms, which then die and decompose, sucking all the oxygen from the water. Reefs collapse. The giant armored fish disappear. By the time the dust settles, about 75% of all species are gone. The world is reset, but the path to land, though narrowed, remains open. Next, we dial to a moment we've touched on before, but it deserves its own horror story. The end Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, also known as the Great Dying. The world is one giant supercontinent, Pangaea. On land, a rich diversity of our own distant relatives, the synapsids, live alongside early reptiles. The seas are full of life that has endured for hundreds of millions of years. Then, in what is now Siberia, the Earth essentially bleeds fire. A series of volcanic eruptions, on a scale we can barely comprehend, begins and continues for hundreds of thousands of years. The atmosphere is choked with carbon dioxide. Global temperatures soar. The oceans become hot, acidic, and oxygen-deprived. It is, without a doubt, the closest life has ever come to being completely erased. Roughly 96% of marine species and 70% of land animals disappear. The trilobites, survivors of 2 previous mass extinctions, are gone for good. It takes millions of years for the planet to recover, and when it does, the stage is set for a whole new cast of characters. Fast forward to the end Triassic extinction, 201 million years ago. Dinosaurs exist, but they're not the kings of the world yet. They share the planet with massive crocodile-like reptiles and other large predators. The supercontinent Pangaea is starting to break apart. Then, as the future Atlantic Ocean begins to rip open, another round of colossal volcanic eruptions kicks off. More CO2 floods the atmosphere, driving rapid climate change and acidifying the oceans. The environmental swings are violent and fast. When the lava stops flowing, around 80% of species are gone, and critically, most of the dinosaurs' major competitors are among the victims. It's as if the world has been cleared specifically for them. Entering the Jurassic period, the dinosaurs step into the spotlight and begin their 135 million year reign. And finally, the one you know best, the end Cretaceous extinction, 66 million years ago. The world is warm and lush. Dinosaurs are at their peak, flowering plants have taken over, and the seas are patrolled by giant marine reptiles like mosasaurs. Then, a 12-kilometer-wide asteroid slams into the planet near Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. You know the story, a fireball, mega tsunamis, and a thick blanket of dust that blocks out the sun, causing a global impact winter. Food chains collapse. Around 75% of species disappear, including every dinosaur that couldn't fly. But tucked away in the shadows, small, furry mammals survive. The end of the age of reptiles becomes the dawn of the age of mammals. Our age. Now, let the dial of the time machine slide forward to today. Are we living through the sixth mass extinction? Officially, no. But scientists are raising the alarm. When they measure current extinction rates, they find species are disappearing hundreds, maybe thousands of times faster than the normal background rate. If this continues, the losses over just a few centuries could rival the Big Five. But this time, the cause isn't a volcano or an asteroid. It's us. Habitat destruction, overconsumption, pollution, and a rapidly changing climate are the triggers. For the first time in Earth's history, a single species holds the fate of countless others in its hands. But here's the crucial difference. The other extinctions were unavoidable natural disasters. This one is, at least in theory, optional. It depends entirely on the choices we make, right now. In every past extinction, something amazing followed. Life, in its incredible resilience, always found a way. New forms rose from the ashes to create new worlds. Mass extinctions are brutal, but they are also creative. They clear the slate, opening up new evolutionary paths. If a future geologist, human or not, were to look at the rock layers of our time, what would they see? A sharp spike in extinctions, a strange layer of plastic and concrete. The question we have to ask ourselves is a heavy one. Do we want to be remembered as the asteroid, or as the species that saw the cliff edge and chose to step back? Earth has survived worse. Life will go on. The real question isn't whether life will continue. It's what that life will look like, and whether we'll still be a part of its story. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through time thought-provoking, please consider subscribing and joining the conversation below. See you next time. For most of our journey through Earth's history, we've treated the planet's surface like a fixed stage. We've watched dinosaurs roam, forests rise, oceans flood, and cities expand. But what if I told you the stage itself is in constant, powerful motion? Today, we're diving deep literally to uncover the engine that drives the entire story of our planet. Plate tectonics. If you could peel the Earth like an orange, you'd find its outermost rind is a shell called the lithosphere. But this shell isn't solid. It's broken into huge interlocking pieces we call tectonic plates. Some plates carry continents, which are thick and buoyant. Others are made of thin, dense oceanic crust. And they're all moving, grinding past each other, crashing together, and sliding underneath one another. How fast? About the same speed your fingernails grows just a few centimeters a year. To us, that's incredibly slow. But on the time scale of our planet, it's a dynamic, planetary dance. What moves them? Beneath this crust, the Earth's mantle a layer of solid rock, so hot, it behaves like a thick, flowing liquid over millions of years. It's constantly churning. These slow-motion currents, driven by heat escaping from the planet's core, drag the plates around. Where plates pull apart, new crust is born. Where they collide, old crust is recycled back into the deep. This endless process is the hidden engine behind almost every major event we've witnessed on our journey. To see this engine in action, let's go to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If we drained all the water, we'd see a gigantic scar running down the globe. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's a massive underwater mountain range where two plates are pulling away from each other. As they separate, hot magma from the mantle rises to fill the gap. It cools and solidifies, forming brand new oceanic crust. This is called seafloor spreading. The ocean floor is literally being created and pushed aside like a conveyor belt. The youngest rocks are right here at the ridge, while the oldest are far away, near the continents. We've already seen the epic results of this process. Back in the Jurassic period, the supercontinent Pangaea began to split apart. This ridge is where it happened. As seafloor spreading continued, the rift widened, eventually becoming the vast Atlantic Ocean we know today, pushing the Americas away from Europe and Africa. In fact, every ocean has a life cycle. It begins as a rift, grows into a mature ocean, and eventually starts closing as plates collide. Geologists call this the Wilson-Sokolow planetary breath that takes hundreds of millions of years to complete. But what happens when plates don't pull apart, but instead crash into each other? For that, we turn to the Himalayas. These awe-inspiring mountains, including Mount Everest, are the result of one of the most spectacular collisions in Earth's recent history. Let's rewind the clock 100 million years. India wasn't attached to Asia. It was an island continent drifting north. The oceanic crust in front of it was being pushed under the Eurasian plate. Then, about 50 million years ago, the two continents finally met. Since continental crust is too light to sink, the only way to go was up. The crust crumpled, folded, and was thrust skyward, creating the highest mountain range on Earth. This isn't a one-time event. The Appalachian Mountains in North America were once just as tall, formed when ancient continents collided to create Pangaea. The Alps rose when Africa pushed into Europe. These collisions don't just build mountains, they completely reshape the planet. They alter weather patterns, redirect ocean currents, and create new habitats. From high-altitude plateaus to rain-shadow deserts, plate tectonics isn't just about rocks. It's about climate, evolution, and the very fabric of life. When an oceanic plate meets a continental plate, something else happens: subduction. The denser oceanic plate dives beneath the continental plate and sinks back into the mantle. A perfect place to see this is the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone of intense volcanic and seismic activity. Here, you'll find the deepest ocean trenches where the plates bend downwards, and chains of volcanoes like those in Japan, the Andes, and the Cascade Range. As the oceanic plate descends, it heats up, releasing water. This water lowers the melting point of the mantle above it, creating magma that rises to the surface and erupts, forming volcanoes. This recycling is crucial for our planet. It pulls old crust back into the Earth, balancing the new crust being made at mid-ocean ridges. It also releases gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor back into the atmosphere, playing a vital role in regulating our planet's long-term climate. Massive volcanic events, often linked to plate tectonics, have caused some of the most severe mass extinctions. Now, let's zoom out in time. Watching the continents over hundreds of millions of years, you'll notice they aren't just drifting randomly. They follow a cycle of coming together to form massive supercontinents, only to break apart and drift away again. We've already met Pangaea, the world of the dinosaurs. Before it, there was Rodinia, and there will be another one in the distant future. Each time the continents merge, the world transforms. Vast, dry deserts form in the interior, ocean circulation shifts, and coastlines vanish. When they break apart, new oceans are born. Coastlines explode with shallow seas perfect for life, and isolated continents become unique laboratories for evolution. This grand cycle of assembly and breakup has set the rhythm for life on Earth for billions of years. From the first microbes to the evolution of humanity, life has always had to adapt to a world in motion. Continents drifting into new climate zones, mountains rising to block weather systems, seas opening and closing. All of these geological processes have shaped the course of evolution. The Cambrian explosion of life happened along newly formed continental shelves. The rise of forests was tied to the position of the continents. Even our own ancestors evolved in the East African Rift Valley, a place where a continent is literally being torn apart. So, the next time you feel the ground beneath your feet, remember, it's not solid. Below us, the mantle churns, the plates glide, and the world is constantly being remade. Volcanoes and earthquakes aren't random disasters. They're the surface expressions of a planet that is alive and dynamic. This movement, this quiet, unstoppable geological engine, has built the world we know and continues to shape its future. Earth isn't just a rock in space, it's a living, breathing system, and we are all just passengers on its moving surface. Thanks for joining this deep dive into our planet's hidden engine. If you found this journey fascinating, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss our next adventure through time and space. The time machine's dial is still, you're not jumping from dinosaurs to mammoths this time, or from molten rock to blue oceans. Instead, the display fills with curves, lines rising and falling like heartbeats. Temperature, CO, sea level, ice volume. Across hundreds of millions of years, they sway together, up and down, like the slow breathing of a living world. You've seen what happened before. Now, it's time to ask, why did the planet keep changing? Let's zoom the timeline out, so that hundreds of millions of years fit on a single screen. See those broad bands? These are the two faces of Earth. Times when the planet was hot, humid, and mostly ice-free at the poles. We call these greenhouse states. And then, times when ice caps grew, sometimes reaching deep into the middle latitudes. These are icehouse states. The climate has never been perfectly steady, but it swings within certain ranges. In some deep greenhouse periods, crocodile-like reptiles lived up in the Arctic, and lush forests reached nearly to the poles. But in severe icehouse episodes, massive glaciers crept far down from the poles, and sea levels fell by hundreds of meters. Our current world, with the Antarctic ice sheets, Greenland's ice, and the alternating ice ages and warmer periods of the last few million years, is an icehouse phase. We're not in the coldest possible mode, but Earth has definitely got its jacket on. So, what flips the switch between these states? The time machine highlights three main dials: greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, sunlight, and Earth's orbit, and the arrangement of continents and oceans. These three interact constantly. Adjust just one, and the whole climate orchestra changes its tune. Let's start with carbon dioxide. You know it today as the gas from burning fossil fuels, from our breath, and from fizzy drinks. But over millions of years, CO is a massive climate lever. The time machine is now diving deep into the Earth, then back out to the surface, tracing carbon's long journey. On these vast timescales, carbon is constantly cycling between the atmosphere as a gas, the ocean as dissolved carbon, living things as organic matter, and rocks, like limestone and coal. Here's a simplified version of this long-term cycle. Volcanoes and seafloor spreading act like vents, adding CO to the atmosphere. At the same time, another process is working to remove it: the weathering of rocks. Rainwater absorbs CO from the air, becoming a very weak carbonic acid. This acid falls on exposed rock, especially silicate minerals, and breaks them down. The dissolved minerals wash into the ocean, where marine organisms use them to build their shells and skeletons. When those organisms die, their shells sink to the seafloor, get buried, and eventually become rock, locking that carbon away. This whole process acts like a planetary thermostat. If the planet gets warmer, chemical weathering speeds up because of more rain and heat. This pulls more CO out of the air, which weakens the greenhouse effect and cools the planet back down a bit. On the other hand, if the planet cools, weathering slows down. Volcanic CO continues to build up in the atmosphere, strengthening the greenhouse effect and warming the planet up. Now, this isn't a quick thermostat. It works over hundreds of thousands to millions of years, but it's one of the key reasons Earth hasn't frozen solid or boiled away. Despite big changes in the sun's brightness and its own geology over billions of years. Next, let's look at the continents. Remember, plate tectonics. Continents don't just drift, they completely redecorate the climate. The time machine shows us a few examples. When continents clump together into a supercontinent, like Pangaea, their vast interiors can become incredibly dry and seasonal, far from the moisture of the ocean. When continents happen to sit over the poles, it's much easier for massive ice sheets to grow on that high ground. The flow of ocean water is critical when long seaways connect the equator to the poles. Warm currents can carry heat north and south, balancing the global temperature. But when those corridors close, climates can become much more extreme and regional. Think of the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau. Their uplift, beginning about 50 million years ago, exposed a huge amount of fresh rock to the atmosphere. This led to more chemical weathering, which drew down more CO from the air. Less greenhouse gas meant a cooler global climate. We can't blame the recent ice ages solely on these mountains, but they are a huge part of the story. Similarly, the opening of the Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica allowed a powerful circumpolar current to form. This current essentially trapped cold water around Antarctica, isolating it from warmer waters and helping its massive ice cap to grow. Move the continents, and you move the winds and the currents. Move those and you change everything: climate zones, deserts, rainforests, and ice. Now, let's zoom in on the last few million years. The climate has been pulsing between glacial periods, ice age ice, and warmer interglacial periods, like the one we're in now. On a graph, these look like the teeth on a saw blade, with big swings happening every tens of thousands of years. What's driving this beat? Surprisingly, it's tiny changes in Earth's orbit and tilt, known as Milankovitch cycles. These cycles involve three things. First, eccentricity. The shape of Earth's orbit changes from being nearly circular to more elliptical. Second, obliquity. The tilt of Earth's axis varies, affecting how extreme our seasons are. And third, Precession, the wobble of Earth's axis, like a spinning top, which changes which hemisphere gets more sun during summer. These cycles alter how sunlight is distributed across the seasons and latitudes. They especially influence how warm the summers are in the high northern latitudes, which is critical for either melting or growing ice sheets. On their own, these orbital wobbles aren't powerful enough to cause such huge global shifts, but they act as a trigger for powerful feedback loops. For example, a slightly cooler summer means last winter's snow doesn't fully melt. That bright white snow reflects more sunlight back into space, which causes even more cooling. The ice sheet grows, reflects more sunlight, and the cycle continues. The ice ages are a beautiful dance between these tiny orbital nudges and the planet's big, amplifying responses. Looking at the time machine's climate speedometer, you see two very different kinds of change. There are slow changes, driven by plate tectonics, the long-term carbon cycle, and mountain building. These play out over millions of years, like the gradual shift from a greenhouse world to our current icehouse state. Then there are fast changes. These are driven by sudden CO injections, catastrophic events, or rapid feedback loops. They happen on timescales of thousands, hundreds, or sometimes even just decades. Examples include the rapid warming that contributed to the end Permian mass extinction, the impact winter after the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, and the abrupt temperature jumps within the Ice Age cycles. The current warming we're experiencing, the Anthropocene warming, sits disturbingly in this fast category. The rise in CO is being compressed into just a few centuries, instead of playing out over tens of thousands of years. The temperature is changing roughly 10 to 100 times faster than many natural shifts in the past. From the planet's perspective, this speed is highly unusual, and for the ecosystems trying to keep up, it's a serious stress test. You lean back and let the time machine play a silent movie of climate over 4.5 billion years. Early on, the young sun was much fainter, but stronger greenhouse gases kept the Earth from freezing over. Later, massive glaciations came and went, including snowball Earth episodes where ice may have reached nearly to the equator. Greenhouse eras flooded the poles with forests and reptiles. Icehouse eras grew glaciers and cooled the seas. Through it all, life changed, adapted, radiated, and sometimes crashed. The key takeaway is simple but powerful. Climate is not a fixed backdrop. It's an active part of Earth's story, constantly responding to deep and shallow forces. Volcanoes, weathering, drifting continents, orbital cycles, and evolving life all have had a hand on the thermostat. And now, one more force sits at the controls, a species that figured out how to burn carbon buried in ancient rocks, changing the atmosphere in a geological blink of an eye. You glance at the CO curve on the display. It spikes sharply upward at the far right edge, the present. It's the same rocker life system that has run for billions of years, now reacting to a very sudden push. The time machine can show you the past, connect the patterns, and reveal the levers of change. But as always, when you look forward, the screen stays blank, because the next piece of the climate story isn't just physics and geology. It's also our choice. Thanks for joining this journey through time. If you want to explore more about our planet's past and future, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've journeyed through deep time, watching continents drift, climates change, and entire worlds nearly end. But woven through every single scene, from the first microbe to the very shape of your hand, is a quieter, more persistent miracle. Life evolves. Imagine the view in our time machine shifting. The maps and graphs fade, replaced by a luminous, branching diagram. It spreads out like the limbs of a great tree, or maybe the intricate threads of a cosmic web. At the tips of these countless branches, tiny labels appear: bacterian ferns and trilobites, dinosaurs, bees, whales, mushrooms, humans. This is the tree of life and, right now, are sitting on one of its newest twigs. Let's travel down the trunk, past billions of years of growth, to the very base. Here, the branches all converge into a single ancient point. We'll call it LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. Now, Luca wasn't the very first living thing, but it's the most recent ancestor from which every living organism today descends. It was likely a tiny, single-celled creature, swimming in the warm, chemical-rich waters of early Earth, maybe near a deep-sea vent. It used a basic genetic code, a blueprint remarkably similar to the one still used by all life, and it powered itself, not with sunlight, but with chemical reactions. From this humble beginning, evolution operated on a few simple, powerful rules. First, mutation. Tiny random changes happen when genes are copied. Second, selection. Some of those changes give an organism a slight edge, helping it survive and reproduce better than its neighbors. And third, just plain luck, or what scientists call genetic drift, where random chance can change a population over time. For billions of years, these simple rules, playing out on a constantly changing planet, produced the entire incredible cast of characters we've seen on our journey. It's crucial to remember that evolution isn't a ladder, climbing from lower to higher forms of life. It's a branching tree. There's no built-in direction, no automatic progress, just endless adaptation to whatever works, right here, right now. As we watch this tree grow, certain moments stand out, game-changing inventions that reshaped life forever. The first great innovation was photosynthesis. Early microbes figured out how to harness the power of sunlight. At first, they used chemicals like hydrogen sulfide, but then, a group called cyanobacteria evolved a new method that produced a waste product, oxygen. This was a revolution and a crisis. Oxygen was toxic to much of early life. It literally rusted the planet, changing the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere. But it also paved the way for something new: high energy, respiration. This new way of making energy was the key that would eventually unlock complex, multicellular life. Next up, a pivotal moment of cooperation. One cell swallowed another, but instead of digesting it, they formed a partnership. This process, called endosymbiosis, is incredible. The engulfed cell became a mitochondrion, a tiny power plant inside the host cell. In some lineages, another partnership formed, creating chloroplast internal solar panels. This gave birth to the eukaryotes, the cell type that makes up everything from amoebas to you and me. With more energy, cells could afford to become more complex, developing bigger genomes and specialized parts. This new complexity led to another breakthrough: multicellularity. In several different branches of the tree, cells that divided started sticking together. Why? Being bigger makes you harder to eat, and better at eating others. It also allows for a division of labor. Some cells could specialize in movement, others in feeding, and others in reproduction. This led to algae, fungi, and of course, animals with tissues and organs. We've already seen some of the strange early experiments with this, like the mysterious ediacaran life forms. Then came the age of armor. Around the time of the Cambrian explosion, animals all over the world started evolving hard parts, shells, spines, and internal skeletons. This offered protection and support for muscles, kicking off a planet-wide evolutionary arms race. Better armor led to stronger jaws, more speed led to sharper claws, better senses led to clever camouflage. The fossil record suddenly explodes with detail after this point, simply because these hard parts preserve so much better than soft tissue. And much later, life conquered the skies, not just once, but at least 4 separate times. First, insects took to the air. Then came the pterosaurs, giant reptiles soaring on leathery wings. They were followed by birds, which are actually feathered dinosaurs, and finally bats, mammals who repurposed their forelimbs for flight. Each time, flight opened up a whole new world of possibilities, escaping predators, finding new food sources, and traveling vast distances, rewiring entire ecosystems in the process. Watching this, you begin to see that the tree of life isn't just about ancestry, it's about relationships. Let's zoom in on a single acacia tree on a savanna. The tree itself is a producer, turning sunlight into leaves and wood. But it's not alone. Fungi on its roots exchange nutrients for sugar. Bacteria in the soil provide fertilizer. Insects eat its leaves, while others pollinate its flowers. Birds nest in its branches. Herbivores graze in its shade, and predators watch from the tall grass. This is an ecosystem, a web of life. If you remove one species, the web trembles and adjusts. But if you remove too many, the whole thing can unravel. Biodiversity, having many different species playing many different roles, is what makes these webs strong and resilient. Mass extinctions don't just erase species, they rip giant holes in these networks. Recovery is about reweaving those connections. As we pan back out to the full tree of life, we see that it's a story of both incredible creativity and ruthless pruning. Entire thriving branches are just gone. The trilobites, rulers of the ancient seas. the ammonites, with their beautiful spiral shells, and of course, the non-avian dinosaurs, whose reign was ended by an asteroid. At the same time, other branches exploded with new life. Insects flourished alongside flowering plants. Mammals diversified into the roles left empty by the dinosaurs. Evolution doesn't plan ahead, it tinkers. What works, persists. And from that perspective, humans are just another twig on another branch. One more experiment in a long, long line. But there's a difference. Most species live out the consequences of evolution without ever knowing it exists. You, however, are different. The branch you're on has produced a brain capable of reflecting on its own origins, a language that can tell stories about the deep past, and a method science that allows us to reconstruct the very tree of life we're a part of. We are the part of the tree that can see the whole tree, and with that knowledge comes responsibility. We've realized we are part of this magnificent, interconnected web, yet we also possess the power to tear it apart. The time machine zooms out one last time. The tree of life glows against the darkness of space, a dynamic 4-billion-year-old structure of life, death, and constant change. From Luca to lichens, jellyfish to jaguars, it has filled every possible niche on this planet. And now, one of its twigs as Homo sapiens holds tools sharp enough to reshape the entire tree. Whether those tools become axes that clear-cut the forest of life, or gardening shears that tend to its branches, well, that's a choice evolution has never had to make before. That choice is ours. Thanks for watching. If this journey through time has opened your mind, consider subscribing and joining us for our next exploration. The time machine is quiet. The dial has slid all the way to the right, stopping on a simple label. Now, outside the viewport, the planet finally looks familiar. Continents are roughly where you know them. The polar caps are white and sharp, and a thin blue haze wraps around everything, the atmosphere. But there's one new thing, faint from orbit but blazing up close. Lights. Strings of light trace the coastlines and rivers. Webs of light sprawl across the plains. Flashes of moving light dance on roads and in the sky. You weren't there for the first bacteria, the first fish, or the first dinosaur, but you are here for this, the first species that lights up the night. You lower the time machine into the darkness above a city. From space, it glows like a cluster of neurons firing. Down at street level, it's a chaotic symphony of noise, exhaust, conversations, and the smell of food. You're looking at one tiny twig on the great tree of life, Homo sapiens. From the outside we look like just another animal. We're mammals with hair and warm blood, vertebrates with 4 limbs, primates with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes. Evolution gave us a few key upgrades: a big, energy-hungry brain, a voice box flexible enough for complex language, and hands dexterous enough to shape tools. The rest was culture, stacked layer upon layer, generation by generation. Stories told around flickering fires, knowledge passed from elders to children, tools refined into technologies, villages growing into cities, then nations, then vast global networks. At some point, one lineage of African apes began to remember more than just where to find food or how the seasons change. It started remembering stories, methods, and solutions to problems. Crucially, it began storing that memory outside the body in words, drawings, symbols, books, and eventually, digital circuits. That external memory became a new kind of evolution, not of genes, but of ideas. You glance back at your own console. This time machine, with its buttons and dials, is really just a metaphor. The real time machine, the one that pieced together geology, astronomy, and biology, was built from something far more fundamental: human curiosity. It was forged through repetition, careful notes, fierce arguments, and painstaking corrections. With that intellectual toolkit, humans reached back into the deepest chasms of time. We learned to read the rocks to discover ancient seas and vanished mountains. We read fossils to uncover the stories of trilobites, dinosaurs, and long-extinct whales. We read DNA to map the intricate branches of the tree of life. We even learned to read the faint light from distant galaxies, to understand the universe's own origin story. We are a species that looks up at the stars and asks, where did all this come from? We look down at the ground and ask, what's under my feet? And we look inward and ask, what am I a part of? Science is our homemade time machine, built from endless questions and incredible patience. The machine you're rewriting in is just a way of visualizing what that collective human effort has revealed. Not far from where you hover, bulldozers are scraping the earth, carving out new shapes for highways, towers, landfills, and dams. If you were to fast forward 1,000,000 years, almost all of this would be gone, eroded and buried by time. But not completely. Future geologists, whoever or whatever they might be, would find a distinctive, telltale layer in the rocks. They'd see a sudden spike in carbon dioxide trapped in ice and sediments. They'd find the fossilized remains of plastic, glass, and strange alloys mixed into mudstones. They'd detect radioactive isotopes left over from nuclear tests. They would notice an abrupt, shocking change in the fossil record as countless wild species decline or vanish, while the pollen from a few domesticated crops suddenly appears everywhere. One thin, weird band in the geological record, shouting across the ages, something unusual happened here. We called this new epoch the Anthropocene. Not because humans are the first species to change the planet's cyanobacteria, did that long ago by filling the atmosphere with oxygen, but because we are the first to know we are doing it. We are the first to see the consequences in real time and still have the power to choose a different path. Over the last few centuries, we've tapped into deep time savings account. We've dug up coal from carboniferous swamps, drilled for oil and gas from ancient seas, and mined phosphates from long-dead marine life. In a geological blink of an eye, we have burned through what nature took hundreds of millions of years to store. The result? A rapid rise in greenhouse gases, acidifying oceans, shifting rainfall patterns, melting ice, and rising seas. At the same time, we've cleared vast forests, dammed the world's great rivers, and fragmented habitats, driving many species to the edge of extinction, and many more over it. For most of Earth's history, major shifts in climate and ecosystems came from slow tectonic movements or rare planet-shaking catastrophes like asteroid impacts. Now, a single species, armed with language, markets, and machines, has become a geological force in its own right. We are powerful, we are clever, we are incredible improvisers. What we don't have is an instruction manual for wielding this kind of planet-scale responsibility. Imagine your time machine's display showing all of Earth's history as one long ruler. The entire span of multicellular life is just a thin strip near the right end. The age of dinosaurs is thinner still. The slice representing modern humans is almost invisible, razor-thin line at the very edge. If Earth's history were condensed into a 24-hour day, life would appear around 4 a.m. Complex, multicellular life wouldn't show up until 9 p.m. The dinosaurs would roam from about 10:40 p.m. until just before 11:40 p.m., and humans like us, we would appear in the last few seconds before midnight. From that perspective, a few things become clear. We are very, very late to the party. The planet owes us nothing. It will continue, with or without us, for billions more years, until the sun itself changes too much for liquid oceans to exist. There is enough time for countless new experiments in evolutioning, lest something happens that permanently derails complex life itself. We are not powerful enough to destroy the planet. But on the timescale of millions of years, the timescale that matters for mammals, for forests, for coral reefs, we matter a lot. The time machine's walls turn transparent, and for the first time, you see your own reflection in the glass. You are not just a passenger on this journey. You are part of the story. You've seen how fragile and contingent the history of life is. You've seen how often catastrophes have reset the world, and you know how long it can take for complexity to recover after a great disaster. But you also know that humans are capable of incredible things. We can cause extinctions, but we can also protect and restore. We can design systems with carelessness, or with great care. Imagine a child, somewhere in the distant future, human or otherwise, learning the history of Earth. When their textbook, or whatever they use, reaches the chapter about us, what will it say? Will it read, "This was the first species to trigger a mass extinction while knowing better"? Or will it say, "This was the first species to notice it was causing damage and deliberately changed course"? Will we be remembered as the asteroid, or as the turning point? That question isn't just for governments or giant corporations. It filters down into the choices we all make every day. What we choose to value and protect, what we teach our children, what we build, and what we decide to dismantle. How we treat each other, and how we treat every other species we share this world with. Deep time doesn't tell you what to do. It just shows you the stakes. The time machine hums softly. The dashboard lights dim, one by one. You've traveled from a world of molten rock and endless bombardment, through the first oceans, into ages of slime, forests, and monsters. You've crossed freezing snowball Earths and sweltering tropical poles. You've witnessed 5 mass extinctions and the incredible recoveries that followed, all the way to right here, right now, to cities glowing under a thin, warming sky. The door unlocks with a quiet click. Outside is your own world. Familiar gravity, familiar air, familiar sounds, traffic, wind, voices, birds. The journey hasn't given you a prophecy. It hasn't told you what will happen. It has given you something more valuable, a sense of how rare and hard-won complex life is, an understanding that planets change, with or without our consent, and proof that small causes, over enough time, can lead to monumental consequences. And it's given you one more thing, the knowledge that you are not separate from Earth's story. You are a chapter in it. You step out of the time machine. It doesn't vanish in a flash of light. It doesn't fly away. It simply becomes what it always was, a way of seeing. Deep time is now part of how you look at everything: a rock, a forest, a river, a city, a child. The past 4.5 billion years are finished. The next line has not yet been written. You are holding the pen. Thanks for watching. If this journey through deep time resonated with you, consider subscribing for more explorations into our world and our place in it. See you next time.